Good evening, listeners. Welcome to Noir Intellect. I'm your host, Victor Blackwood. If you enjoy mysteries, hidden clues, and uncovering the truth, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Leave it in the comments below. Now, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp. The mystery begins now. Chapter 1. The handwriting on the envelope. The bicycle messenger arrived at the brownstone at 4 minutes, carrying an envelope that made Nero Wolfe stop eating. That alone justified my interest. Wolfe was behind his desk, with a plate of anchovy toast at his right hand and a glass of beer at his left. He had returned from the plant rooms 12 minutes earlier, and his schedule allowed him 45 minutes of office work before dinner became the most important event in New York. The fire was low, the curtains were open to a cold grey afternoon, and the office smelled of toasted bread, old leather, and the orchids that clung faintly to Wolfe's clothes. The bell rang twice. Fritz was in the kitchen preparing a sauce that required loyalty, so I went to the front door. The messenger stood on the stoop, with one foot still clipped to a bicycle pedal. He was about 20, thin, red-eared from the wind, and wearing a blue jacket marked City Rapid Delivery. He held a square cream envelope in a gloved hand. Nero Wolfe, you have found the building. Personal delivery. He has to sign. Give it to me. The messenger pulled it back. I was told, Mr. Wolfe had to receive it himself. He receives very little himself. I am Archie Goodwin. I know who you are. That saves introductions. He looked past me into the hall. The man who hired me said Mr. Wolfe must open it before 6. What man? I don't know his name. Then describe the man without it. The messenger hesitated. Middle-aged, dark overcoat, grey hat. Nervous. Nervous how? He kept looking at the station clock. Paid cash. Gave me $20 extra and said I had to place the envelope in Mr. Wolfe's hand. Where did he hire you? Outside Pennsylvania Station. What time? 3:35. Did he follow you? I don't think so. You usually know. I'm on a bicycle. That was not an answer, but it was better than some I had received from policemen. I reached again. He held the envelope tighter. Mr. Wolfe personally. Fine. I opened the door wider. Bring the bicycle inside if it has a vote. He wheeled it into the vestibule, and I led him to the office. Wolfe looked up as we entered. His eyes went first to the messenger, then to the envelope. He did not reach for another piece of anchovy toast. The envelope was addressed in black ink, M.R. Nero Wolfe, 918 West 35th Street, New York's. The writing was large, slanted slightly to the left and unmistakable. It was Wolfe's handwriting. I knew it because I had seen him write thousands of words over the years, mostly checks, brief instructions, and notes expressing disappointment in language too formal to be accidental. The capital W had a narrow middle point. The lowercase r ended with a short upward hook. The number 8 was drawn as 2 separate loops rather than one continuous line. Whoever had written the address had copied all of it. Wolfe's right hand remained flat on the desk. Do not touch it, he said. I stopped. The messenger looked at me. I have to get a signature. You will get one, Wolfe said. Place the envelope on the corner of Mr. Goodwin's desk. The messenger obeyed. Now step back. He did. Wolfe looked at Fritz's bell and pressed it once. Fritz entered from the kitchen, wiping his hands. Yes, sir. Bring the glass cover used for the silver pheasant. Fritz blinked. That was nearly a shout from him. At once. He returned with a tall glass dome normally kept in the dining room. Wolfe directed him to invert it over the envelope without touching the paper. Fritz used 2 silver serving forks to lift the edge and slide the cover into place. The messenger stared. Is there a bomb in it? If there were, I said, the glass would improve our view. Wolfe ignored me. He addressed the messenger. Your name? Peter Lang. Age? 22. Address? Lang gave it. Who informed you? I told Mr. Goodwin. A man outside Penn Station. Repeat the description. Lang did. Wolfe asked. Height about 5'10". Weight? Maybe 160. Voice quiet, rough, like he had a cold. Hands? Lang frowned. What about them? Were they gloved? Yes. Brown gloves. Did he remove them? No. He handed it to me. With which hand? Right. Did he carry anything else? A folded newspaper. Which newspaper? I didn't see. Did he smell of tobacco, medicine, food, or machinery? Lang stared. I don't know. Think. The messenger shifted his weight. Maybe medicine, something sharp. Hospital? Maybe. Or cleaning fluid. Was he wet? No. It began raining at 3:20, I said. Lang nodded. He was under the station awning. Wolfe's lips moved slightly. Did he watch you leave? Yes. Did he say anything besides the instructions? He said, tell Wolfe the hour matters more than the message. I wrote it down. Wolfe said, exact words. Yes, nothing else. He said if Mr. Wolfe did not open it before 6, someone would die. The office changed. Not much. The fire still burned. Traffic still moved on West 35th Street. And Fritz still stood near the door holding 2 silver forks. But the envelope under glass no longer looked like paper. Wolfe said, why did you omit that? Lang swallowed. I thought you might refuse the delivery. Reasonable, I said. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, give him a receipt. I wrote one and signed it. Lang took it. Am I done? No, Wolfe said. You will remain for 10 minutes. I have deliveries. You have a witness's memory. It may improve if given time. Lang looked toward the door. I said, you were paid $20 extra. Consider this the second half. He stayed. Wolfe leaned back. Fritz, telephone Mr. Panzer. Ask him to come immediately. Fritz left. I looked at the envelope. Could be poison powder. Yes. Explosive? Possibly. Microfilm. Phooey. Then why not have the police bomb squad take it? Wolfe's face tightened. Because the sender expects me to open it. That usually argues against opening it. Usually. I moved closer to the glass dome but kept my hands behind my back. The handwriting was too good. Not similar, not suggestive. Identical. I said, whoever copied this had a sample of your writing. Obviously. A lot of it. Possibly. Or access to a letter you wrote. Wolfe's eyes remained on the envelope. I waited. Nothing. That was when I knew the handwriting had reached farther into him than he wanted to admit. I said, you recognize it? He did not answer. Not merely your own handwriting. This particular imitation. Still nothing. Peter Lang looked from Wolfe to me. I said, 18 years ago. Wolfe's eyes came to mine. That was a guess, but not a blind one. Wolfe keeps old failures in a private mental cabinet, polished more carefully than victories. I had heard him mention only 3. One had occurred 18 years earlier, before I began working for him. His voice became colder. Why 18? Because that is the number you are counting. Lang looked alarmed. He didn't say 18. No, I said. Wolfe did without moving his lips. Wolfe pushed the plate of anchovy toast away. That was a confession, he said. Lang, did the man mention a name? No. A place? No. A phrase? Lang thought. He asked if I knew where West 35th Street was. I said yes. Then he said, the house with the orchids. That is in newspapers, I said. Wolfe ignored me. Did he know Mr. Goodwin's name? Did he say Nero Wolfe or Mr. Wolfe? Nero Wolfe, pronounce it correctly? Lang blinked. I think so. Did he say Wolfe or Wolf? There's a difference to the ear sometimes. I don't know. Wolfe closed his eyes. I looked at the clock. 4:17. 1 hour and 43 minutes until 6. Suppose we put the envelope in a steel box and open it remotely. No. Suppose Saul examines it first. Yes. That means we are not obeying the instruction. We are not livestock. I sat at my desk. What happened 18 years ago? Wolfe opened his eyes. Nothing happened. That is rarely true. A man died. A woman vanished. A confession was written. I failed to identify the writer. In your handwriting? Yes. Peter Lang stopped shifting his feet. I said, who was the dead man? Caleb Horn. The name meant nothing to me. What was he? A private banker. Where? New York. How did he die? Suicide. So it appeared. And the confession arrived by post the morning after his death. It stated that I had advised Mr. Horn to destroy certain records and that I accepted responsibility for his act. I stared at him. In your handwriting, an excellent imitation. Signed? Yes. Your signature. And the woman Eleanor Voss. Mr. Horn's secretary. She disappeared the same day. Suspected by the police. By you. Wolfe's lips tightened. I suspected everyone. Did you find her? Did you find who copied your handwriting? No. You failed. He looked at me. I have already used that word. It was not a request to use it again. I nodded toward the envelope. And now the same hand has returned. Not necessarily the same hand. The style is identical. The style is mine. The imperfections? There are none visible. That troubled him more than a bad imitation would have. Saul Panzer arrived at 4:31. Fritz brought him in and I gave him the facts. Saul examined the envelope through the glass without touching it. "Weight?" he asked. "Unknown," I said. "Thickens about 1/8 inch. Any bulge? No smell? We have not lifted the cover." Saul walked around the desk. "Could be a folded sheet, powder packet, razor mechanism, contact poison or nothing." "Cheerful," I said. Wolfe instructed him to examine the messenger's route from Penn Station, find any witness who had seen the nervous man, and determine whether Lang had been followed. Saul left with Lang. At 4:40, the office was quiet again. Fritz brought fresh beer. Wolfe did not drink it. I said, "We should call Kramer." "No. A threat says someone dies before 6. It says someone will die if I do not open the envelope before 6. That distinction will comfort the corpse. The threat is designed to force haste. Sometimes haste is appropriate. Rarely." I looked at the handwriting. What records did Caleb Horn have? Accounts involving charitable trusts, private loans, and confidential investments. Who benefited from destroying them? Many people. Did any disappear? A ledger. Found? No. What did Eleanor Voss know? Possibly everything. And you never found her? No. Was she guilty? I do not know. That answer still offended him after 18 years. I got up and went to the bookcase. On the third shelf from the bottom, behind a set of old legal volumes, was a locked compartment. Wolfe pretended I did not know about. "Do you still have the confession?" "Yes." "Here?" "Yes." "May I see it?" "No." "Why?" "Because you will compare it with the envelope and learn nothing. That has never stopped me before." He scowled. At 4:52 he took a key from his desk drawer, handed it to me and pointed toward the compartment. Inside was a grey file tied with black cord. Caleb Horn, 18 years AGO. I brought it to the desk. The confession was on heavy cream paper. The handwriting matched the envelope. Every letter, every slope, every loop, but not completely. I placed the confession beside the glass dome. Wolfe watched me. I said, "The old letter has a small break in the upward stroke of every capital." "Yes." "The envelope does not." "Yes." "So this was copied from your handwriting, not from the old confession." "Probably." "Whoever wrote today's envelope has a newer sample." "Yes, which means the old case and the present one are connected by knowledge, not by the same document." Wolfe leaned back. "Good." Praise from Wolfe meant either progress or danger. The clock showed 5 minutes past 5. 55 minutes remained. The telephone rang, I answered. A man's voice said, "Has he opened it? Who is this?" "Tell Wolfe the dead do not forgive delay." The line went dead. I replaced the receiver. Wolfe looked at me. I repeated it. He closed his eyes for 3 seconds. Then he said, "Archie, remove the glass cover." I stared. "You told me not to touch it." "I am modifying the instruction." "Why?" "Because the caller knows the envelope remains unopened. So he can see the office. Or someone here is informing him." I looked at the windows. Across the street, 3 buildings offered views of the office. Wolfe said, "Close the curtains." I did. "Now the cover." I lifted it carefully. The envelope lay still. Wolfe said, "Use the silver tongs, turn it over." On the back flap was a dark red wax seal, stamped with a single letter, H. Caleb Horn. Or someone wanted us to think so. Wolfe's face changed slightly. "Do not open it," he said. "We have 48 minutes. The hour matters more than the message." That is what the messenger said. No, that is what the sender wished me to hear. Wolfe looked at the envelope, then at the old confession. "The envelope is not intended to tell me something. It is intended to make me perform something." "Open it before 6. "Yes, for an observer, possibly." "Why?" "Because opening it may prove I remember the old case, fear the old accusation, or possess something the sender seeks." "What?" Eyes moved to the grey file. "The confession." I looked at the sealed envelope. "The true target is not inside." "No, it is already in this office." Wolfe rang for Fritz. When Fritz entered, Wolfe said, "Bring the small steel dispatch box. Also telephone Mr. Kramer and ask him to come," without announcing his destination. I smiled. "You said no police." "I have received information since then." "The phone call, the handwriting." He looked at the old confession. 18 years ago I failed because I treated the letter as evidence of a death. And now I suspect both letters are key to what?" Wolfe's gaze settled to the sealed envelope. To the person who has waited 18 years for me to touch the wrong one. Chapter 2. The Confession of Edward Hale. The second message arrived at 5:22, not by bicycle messenger, postman, or nervous stranger, but through the kitchen dumbwaiter. That was a neat trick, since our dumbwaiter did not connect to the street. Fritz discovered the full sheet resting on the lower shelf when he opened the panel to send clean napkins upstairs. He brought it to the office between two plates, refusing to touch it with his hands. Wolfe approved the precaution with a grunt. Kramer had not yet arrived. The original envelope remained inside the small steel dispatch box on the corner of Wolfe's desk. The box was not locked. Wolfe said a lock would only flatter the sender. The old Caleb Horn file lay beside it, open to the forged confession written in Wolfe's hand. Fritz placed the plates on my desk. A single typed page rested between them. I read it aloud. Nero Wolfe will open the sealed envelope before witnesses at 6 o'clock. It contains the final confession of Edward Hale and proof that an innocent man was blamed for his crimes. If Wolfe refuses, copies of the confession and supporting records will be delivered to every major newspaper under Wolfe's name. The public will be told that he concealed them for 18 years. There was no signature. At the bottom, one sentence had been typed in capital letters. The deadline is public, because the guilt was private. I looked at Wolfe. Edward Hale? He had not moved, but the expression around his mouth had hardened. I said, yesterday the old case concerned Caleb Horn. It still does. And now Edward Hale has joined it. He was always in it. That would have been useful an hour ago. You had not asked the proper question. I asked what happened 18 years ago. You asked about the handwriting. Wolfe could use precision as either a tool or a curtain. That time it was a curtain, I said. Pull it back. He regarded me for a moment, then shifted his eyes toward the steel box. Edward Hale was Caleb Horn's financial advisor. The dead banker? Yes. What kind of advisor? He managed private trusts, family investments, and tax shelters for clients who preferred discretion to understanding. Meaning rich people, usually. Honest, no. That came too quickly. Proven? Never. Suspected by whom? By me. I waited. Wolfe folded his hands over his middle. 3 families entrusted Hale with funds totaling nearly $400,000. The money was intended for widows, children, and 2 charitable foundations. Over 5 years, portions of those trusts were transferred into companies controlled through Caleb Horn's bank. Shell companies? Yes. Did Horn know? That was never established. And the money disappeared. Most of it. What happened to Hale? He was indicted for theft and fraud. Convicted? He vanished 4 days before trial. Where from? His home in Brooklyn. Voluntarily. No one knew. Family, a wife named Clara and a son named Thomas. The boy was 9. I looked at the old confession. And the forged note? Wolfe's eyes shifted to it. Not that one. A second note was found in Hale's study. How many forged letters were in this case? Too many. What did Hale's note say? That he had stolen the trust funds, that Caleb Horn had known nothing of it, and that he intended to leave the country. Written in Hale's hand, an imitation. Signed? Yes. Believed by the police, accepted with relief. By Horn? I said. You believed it was forged? Yes. Why? The letter used the phrase moral cowardice. Hale habitually spoke of practical cowardice and financial cowardice, never moral cowardice. Also, the lowercase t in the note had a crossing stroke Hale had abandoned after injuring his right hand. That is thin. It was enough to doubt, not enough to prove. And 4 days later, Horn died from cyanide. 6 days later. Then your forged confession arrived, saying you advised Horn to destroy records. Yes, and Horn's secretary, Eleanor Voss, disappeared. Yes, I leaned back. So the old case was not only Horner's death. It began with Edward Hale's missing trust money, Hale's disappearance, and a forged confession protecting Horn. Correct. Why did you call it the Caleb Horn case? Because that was the file under which the police placed it. You kept their title. I kept the label, not the conclusion. I looked again at the typed message. The sender says the envelope contains Hale's final confession and proof an innocent man was blamed. An innocent man, Wolfe said. Not necessarily Edward Hale. Who else was blamed? Several men were blamed for parts of the affair. Hale for the theft, Horn for concealing records. I was blamed privately for failing to expose the truth. A trust clerk named Walter Dean was dismissed and later imprisoned for falsifying transfer forms. Was Dean innocent? I believed so. What happened to him? He served 6 years before being released, but the conviction destroyed his career and reputation. I whistled softly. Wife? Children. He has lived alone since his release. Could Dean be involved in sending the message? Possibly. Did anyone connected to the old case have access to your handwriting? Several people did. Many people do. The message says you must open the envelope publicly. Who counts as the public? Witnesses, presumably. The newspapers if I refuse. That means the sender wants a spectacle. Yes. Or proof that you possess the old confession. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. That remains likely. Fritz was still standing near the door. Wolfe asked, "Who entered the kitchen today?" "No one, sir." "Deliveries? The fishmonger at 10. The baker at 11:15. A boy from the grocer at 2. Did any enter beyond the rear hall?" "No, the dumbwaiter shaft." Fritz frowned. "It opens in the basement pantry, kitchen, second-floor linen room, and third-floor storage closet." "Was every panel locked?" "The kitchen panel was not. The others should have been." "Should have been." Fritz drew himself up. "I will inspect them." "He left," I said. "Somebody may be inside the house." Wolfe gave me a look. "I am aware of the possibility." I drew my gun, checked it, and put it in my coat pocket. That always improves the atmosphere. Search the upper floors. I started toward the hall. The doorbell rang. Kramer entered with enough weather on his coat to qualify as a local storm. He had brought Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins, who gave me the kind of greeting usually reserved for damaged property. Kramer took the red leather chair. "What is it?" Wolfe pointed at the typed message. I handed it over. Kramer read it, passed it to Stebbins, and looked at the steel box. "That the envelope?" "Yes." "Opened?" "No." "What's inside?" "Unknown." "Bomb squad is downstairs." Wolfe scowled. "You brought them without instruction. You said, 'Come quietly.' I came quietly with men who know what not to touch. That description rarely fits policemen." Kramer ignored him. "What is Edward Hale to this?" I gave him the compact version. Hale managed trusts. Money vanished. Hale disappeared. A forged note. Confessed. Haunt died. Wolfe received another forged confession. Eleanor vanished. Kramer listened without interruption. "You never solved it?" he asked Wolfe. "No." That silenced even Stebbins. Kramer looked at the envelope with renewed interest. "Who knew you had the old file?" "Archie, Fritz, Theodore, and perhaps 3 people who saw it before it was sealed. Names: Clara Hale, Eleanor Voss, and Walter Dean. 1 missing, 2 still available." "Yes, convenient, only to fools," Fritz returned. The third-floor panel was open. I stood. "Anything missing?" "A folded blanket and 1 storage box moved." "Person?" "No." "Window?" The rear storage window was unlatched. Kramer told Stebbins to check the alley and roof access. I went with him. The upper floors were empty. The rear window opened above a narrow iron ladder, once used by workmen servicing the roof gutter. Fresh mud marked the sill. Whoever had entered could have climbed up from the neighboring yard, slipped through the storage room, placed the message in the dumbwaiter, and left the same way. On the floor beside the window was a small grey thread. I wrapped it in paper. Stebbins inspected the ladder. Recent scrape on the paint. Somebody came prepared, or knew the house. We returned to the office at 5:41. 19 minutes remained. Wolfe had not touched the beer Fritz placed before him. "That was more serious than the threat," Kramer said. "We open it." "No. You have a threat to release documents in your name. Opening it may release something more immediate. The bomb squad can examine it. The sender specified that I open it, personally before witnesses, so disappoint him safely." Wolfe looked at the typed message. "The condition is contradictory." I said, "How?" "The envelope was delivered privately, but the sender now demands a public opening. If the contents alone mattered, any secure examination would suffice. The act must be witnessed. To damage you? Perhaps. To prove the envelope was opened before 6? Perhaps." Kramer said. "You're stalling." "I am thinking." At 5:42. A clock does not improve a bad conclusion. The telephone rang. I answered. A woman's voice said, Has Edward Hale confessed yet? She sounded elderly, controlled, and tired. Who is this? You have 14 minutes. Where is Hale? Ask Wolfe what he did with the truth. The line went dead. Kramer was already motioning to Stebbins, who left to trace the call. I repeated the words. Wolfe's eyes closed. I said, female, older than 50, natural voice. I think so. Educated? Yes. Afraid? No. Angry? Could it be Clara Hale? You would know better. She would be approximately 64. Another woman connected to the trusts, possibly. Eleanor Voss, approximately 60. Kramer said, if any of them are alive. Wolfe opened his eyes. The caller asked whether Hale had confessed yet. So, she did not ask whether I had opened the envelope. I saw it. She expects the confession to become known only after opening, but she is not watching The Office. Possibly. The earlier male caller knew it remained unopened. Yes, 2 people, at least. Kramer grunted. One sending threats, one asking questions, or one controlling the other. Wolfe pointed to the typed message. Examine the wording, Archie. I read it again. It says the envelope contains Hale's final confession and proof an innocent man was blamed. Yes, not the original financial records. Yes, and if you refuse, copies of the confession and supporting records go to newspapers under your name. Yes. So, the sender already has copies. Precisely. Then, why care whether you open the envelope? Wolfe's lips moved slightly. Because the envelope contains something other than the promised confession, Kramer said. You don't know that. I know the threat is illogical otherwise. If they possess the evidence and desire publication, they need not involve me. They require my hand, my witnesses, and a deadline. To authenticate the material, or to make me responsible for what happens when the seal is broken. The clock showed 5:49. 11 minutes. Fritz entered carrying a large silver tray. Wolfe said, place it beside the dispatch box. Fritz did. Wolfe instructed me to bring the old Hale note from the grey file. I found it behind the Horn confession. It was written on thin white paper in Edward Hale's imitation hand. Wolfe asked for a magnifying lens. He compared the old note, the address on the sealed envelope, and the typed message. Kramer's patience began making sounds. What are you looking for? The pressure pattern. On typed paper, on the envelope. Wolfe pointed. Archie, the address imitates my hand, but the writer pressed too heavily on every downward stroke. Yes, the old Hale note shows the same habit. I examined both. He was right. The ink differed. The handwriting imitated different men, but both writers bore down hard at the beginning of vertical strokes. Same forger? I asked. Possibly. 18 years later, muscular habits persist. Kramer leaned closer. So whoever wrote Hale's fake confession then wrote Wolfe's address now. Yes, and may still be alive, obviously. The clock showed 5:53. Kramer stood. That is enough. We open it safely. Wolfe said. Sit. No. Then stand quietly. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, bring the steel letter knife with the long handle. I got it. Kramer said. You're opening it? No, mister. Goodwin is cutting the bottom edge while the envelope remains inside the box. That violates the personal opening condition. Good. I placed the envelope upright using tongs. The bomb squad men waited in the hall with protective equipment, which made our office seem less respectable than usual. At Wolfe's direction, I slid the knife through the lower edge without disturbing the wax seal. Nothing exploded. No powder appeared. I widened the slit. A folded sheet dropped into the steel box. So did a small brass key. Kramer exhaled. I lifted the paper with tongs and unfolded it beneath the glass dome. It was handwritten. Not in Wolfe's hand. Not in Edward Hale's. The page began. I, Edward Hale, confess that I took the trust funds and caused the death of Caleb Horn. Below it were 3 paragraphs describing transfers, false companies, and a meeting with Horn on the night of his death. At the bottom was Edward Hale's signature. Wolfe read it from a distance. Kramer said, There's your confession. No, what is wrong with it? The date. The document was dated 6 months after Hale vanished. Kramer said, That could prove he remained alive. It could, but you don't believe it. No. Why? The confession states that Walter Dean forged the transfer slips alone. The innocent man, yes, you, thought Dean was innocent. I did. Then Hale is blaming him. Exactly. I examined the key. A number was engraved on it. No name, no institution. Wolfe asked, Any residue, none visible. He finally drank his beer. The clock struck 6. Nothing happened. No gunshot in the street. No telephone call. No messenger. No collapse of civilization beyond its usual condition, Kramer said, lying past. Wolfe looked at the sealed top of the envelope. No, the deadline was met. You didn't open it personally. The sender may not know that, I said, unless the key is the real deadline. Wolfe nodded. The confession is bait. The key is instruction. To locker 42? Probably. Where? That is what the writer expects us to discover from the old case. I searched the Hale file. A property inventory listed Edward Hale's office, home, bank accounts, safe deposit boxes and railway luggage storage. One entry was circled in pencil. Grand Central Terminal, parcel locker 42, amble when searched. I read it aloud. Kramer said, 18 years ago? Yes. Wolfe stared at the brass key. The locker was empty because the police searched it after Hale disappeared. Could be reused now, I said. Or the number refers to the original locker system retained in the lower baggage room. Kramer reached for the telephone. I'll send men. No. He turned. Wolfe said, the sender threatened publication under my name. The purpose is not merely to recover evidence. Someone expects me to go to locker 42. Why you? Because 18 years ago I was the only man who declared Hale's note forged. You think the locker contains proof you were right? Perhaps. Then why the trick? Because proof can be arranged. I looked at the confession. You think Hale did not write this either? I know he did not. How? Wolfe pointed to the signature. Edward Hale crossed the final stroke of his capital H from right to left. This signature crosses from left to right. Kramer leaned over it. A forgery. Yes, the sender is still forging Hale's hand and protecting Walter Dean's accuser, I said. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. No, the document blames Dean too crudely. It is designed to make me reject it. To what end? To persuade me that the true evidence must be in locker 42, Kramer said. So we go. We? You are not going anywhere, I said. The terminal has drafts. Wolfe ignored me. The key will be taken to Grand Central, he said. Archie will go with Mr. Panzer. The police will remain distant, Kramer objected. Wolfe silenced him with a look. If uniformed men appear, whoever watches the locker will withdraw. We need the person most eager to see me accept Edward Hale's confession. I placed the brass key in an envelope. Who is that? Wolfe looked at the forged document, the old file, and the sealed envelope whose top had never been opened. Not Edward Hale. You're sure he is dead? No. Then who? The person whose innocence depends upon Hale remaining guilty. Outside, evening had settled over West 35th Street. The 6 o'clock deadline had passed, but the true demand had only begun. The envelope had not contained a confession. It had contained a route. At the end of that route waited locker 42, an 18-year-old lie, and someone who had learned that the easiest way to lead Nero Wolfe toward a false answer was to place it inside handwriting he could not ignore. Chapter 3. The Three Visitors. By 6:30 that evening, the sealed envelope had attracted 3 claimants, 2 accusations, and enough old bitterness to furnish a courtroom. The envelope itself remained inside the steel dispatch box on Wolfe's desk. The wax seal was unbroken, though I had cut the lower edge earlier and removed the forged confession and brass key. Wolfe insisted that the envelope remain exactly where visitors could see it. That made it bait. The grey file concerning Edward Hale lay locked away again. The key marked 42 was in my pocket. Kramer and Stebbins had gone to arrange quiet observation at Grand Central, though Wolfe had told them twice that quiet observation performed by policemen usually became public scenery. Fritz was setting the dining room table when the bell rang. The first visitor was Clara Hale. She stood on the stoop in a dark wool coat, holding herself straight against the evening wind. She was in her early 60s, silver-haired, pale, and composed with the effort of someone who had spent 18 years refusing to collapse in front of witnesses. Mrs. Edward Hale, I asked. Yes, Archie Goodwin, I know. That made 2 strangers in one day who knew me before I knew them. Fame is useful until it begins arriving at the door. She entered without waiting to be invited and walked into the office ahead of me. Wolfe regarded her from behind his desk. Clara Hale saw the envelope immediately, her eyes fixed on it. So it is true, she said. What is true? Wolfe asked. That Edward left a confession that has not been established. I was told it was delivered to you. An envelope was delivered, in your handwriting. An imitation. She moved closer to the desk. Have you opened it? No. Why not? Wolfe's brows rose. Because I chose not to. Her hands tightened around her handbag. For 18 years my husband has been called a thief. My son grew up under that name. Every newspaper said Edward stole money from widows and children and ran away before trial. Now there may be proof that he did not, and you are refusing to read it. I am refusing to perform on command. This is not a performance. The sender specified an audience and a deadline. That is performance. Clara looked toward me. Did you read what was inside? I said. We removed one document without breaking the seal. Her face changed. What document? A confession attributed to your husband. Attributed? Wolfe says the signature is forged. She turned back to Wolfe. You said that 18 years ago, about Edward's farewell note. Yes, and no one believed you, correct. Were you right? I do not know. Her composure slipped for half a second. You still do not know? No. Perhaps you should stop treating uncertainty as wisdom. Wolfe's lips tightened. I expected thunder, but he only said, Sit. She took the chair nearest to the desk. Who told you to come? I asked. A woman telephoned me. Name? She did not give one. What did she say? That Wolfe had received Edward's final confession and would open it before witnesses at 6. It is past 6, I said. She called at 5:15. I came as quickly as I could. Where do you live? Brooklyn Heights. Did the caller say who else would attend? No. Did she sound young? No, older. Educated. The same woman who had telephoned us. Wolfe asked. Did you recognize the voice? Clara hesitated. No. You considered the question before answering. Because it reminded me of someone. Whom? Eleanor Voss. The name reached across 18 years and pulled the room tighter. Horn's secretary? I asked. Yes. You believe she is alive? I said. The voice reminded me of her. Did you and Miss Voss know each other well? Clara looked at Wolfe instead of me. She visited our home several times before Edward disappeared. Why? Wolfe asked. Bank business. Caleb Horn's business? Edward's? Were they intimate? Clara's face chilled. No, that was not an accusation. It sounded like one. Wolfe leaned back. Did your husband trust Eleanor Voss? Yes, more than he trusted you. Clara rose. I moved one step toward her in case she intended to improve Wolfe's manners by hand. She did not. My husband trusted me, she said. He also believed keeping me ignorant would protect me. Men often call that trust when they mean control. Wolfe inclined his head slightly. A useful distinction. The bell rang again. The second visitor was Martin Shaw, senior partner of Shaw and Leland Bank. He was 55, broad through the chest, smooth through the face, and dressed in a dark coat that had never encountered an uncertain tailor. He handed me his card before giving his name. I understand Mr. Wolfe has received material concerning Edward Hale. Information travels quickly. It has waited 18 years. I took him into the office. Clara Hale stood when she saw him. You, Shaw removed his hat. Hale, you have no right to be here. I represent families whose money your husband stole. My husband was never convicted because he ran. He disappeared, conveniently. Wolfe's voice cut. Between them, Snide. Sit, both of you. Shaw chose the red leather chair. Clara remained where she was for a moment, then sat with her back straight. Shaw looked at the envelope. That is it? That is an envelope, Wolfe said. Have you opened it? Why not? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You are the second visitor to ask that. It is the obvious question. No. The obvious question is what it contains. You asked why I refused to touch it. Shaw smiled without pleasure. I was told you feared the contents. By whom? A typed message delivered to my office. He removed a folded sheet and handed it to me. The wording was almost identical to ours. Nero Wolfe possesses Edward Hale a final confession. He will open it before witnesses or accept responsibility for concealing the truth. At the bottom was a handwritten line. The families have waited long enough. I passed it to Wolfe. Which families? I asked Shaw. The Alden, Barrett, and Cross trusts. Hale managed all three. Did your bank hold the accounts? My clients held them through Caleb Horn's institution. After Horn died, our bank became trustee for what remained. How much was lost? $386,000, Clara said. You have repeated that number for 18 years. Because it remained stolen for 18 years. You accused Edward before the audit was complete. The audit was complete enough, Wolfe said. Who benefited when Hale vanished? Shaw frowned. The thief. Who benefited financially? No one. The money was gone. Banks received fees. Lawyers received fees. Replacement trustees received fees. Shaw's mouth tightened. You are suggesting my institution profited from fraud. I am observing that loss is rarely universal. The bell rang for the third time. I opened the front door and found Walter Dean leaning on a black cane. He was 58, thin, sharp-faced, and dressed in a worn brown suit. His right leg dragged slightly when he crossed the threshold. He declined to give me his coat. "Walter Dean," he said. "I worked for Edward Hale. I know. No, you know what the papers said. That, too." His gaze went past me toward the office. "Is Clara here?" "Yes." "Sure?" "Yes." "You collected the whole graveyard." Wolfe prefers complete sets. Dean entered the office and stopped when he saw the envelope. Unlike Clara, he did not move toward it. Unlike Shaw, he did not ask whether it had been opened. He stared at it as if it might suddenly speak. Clara rose. "Walter, Mrs. Hale." There was warmth in neither voice, but there was history. Shaw said, "You were not invited." Dean turned on him. "I served 6 years because Hale disappeared, and men like you needed someone in a cell. You altered transfer slips. I copied instructions signed by your clients. You admitted falsifying records. I admitted it after 4 days without sleep and a promise of a shorter sentence." Wolfe said, "Mr. Dean, sit." Dean chose the chair farthest from the desk, but his eyes remained on the envelope. Wolfe regarded all 3 visitors. "You each received a message?" Dean nodded. "Mine," said the envelope, "proved Hale framed me." "Exact wording." Dean took a crumpled card from his pocket. I read it. "Edward Halsey's confession will show that Walter Dean obeyed orders and was sent to prison to protect the true thief. Be at the Wolfe house before 6. I passed it to Wolfe. "Typed on the same machine?" I asked. He examined it. "Likely." Dean said, "Open the envelope." Shaw looked at him. "You did not ask whether it had already been opened." Dean's eyes returned to the steel box. "If it had been opened, we would know, would we?" Wolfe asked. Dean's fingers tightened around his cane. "I came for proof," Clara said. So did Shaw said. "I came to protect my clients from another deception." Wolfe made a face. 3 motives, each admirably phrased. Shaw leaned forward. "Why will you not touch the envelope?" There it was again. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, Mr. Shaw has now asked twice." 3 times, Wolfe said. "Once upon entering, once after reading his message, and now." Shaw's expression remained pleasant. "What significance do you attach to ordinary curiosity?" "Curiosity concerns contents. You are concerned with contact." "I do not understand." "You understand the verb touch." Clara looked at Shaw. Dean's eyes moved from the envelope to Wolfe for the first time. Wolfe continued. "The messenger was instructed to place the envelope in my hand. The sender required that I open it personally. The anonymous caller asked whether I had done so. Now, Mr. Shaw repeatedly asks why I refuse to touch it." Shaw gave a brief laugh. "You think I sent it? I have not said so, but you imply it." "I imply that you know physical contact matters." "That is nonsense." "Then explain your interest." "I was told the envelope was addressed in your own handwriting. Naturally, I wondered why you feared it." Wolfe's eyes became half closed. "Who told you about the handwriting?" The office went still. Shaw's smile disappeared. He looked at the typed message in Wolfe's hand. "It was mentioned there." "No," I said. "It wasn't." I read the message again. It referred to Hale's confession, witnesses, concealment, and responsibility. Nothing about handwriting. Clara turned toward Shaw. Dean leaned on his cane. Shaw said, "The person who telephoned my office mentioned it." "You said the message was delivered," Wolfe replied. "It was. There was also a call, male or female, a man, description of voice, I do not remember." "You remembered the handwriting." Shaw rose. "I will not be cross-examined because of a phrase." "You came voluntarily." "I came because my clients were robbed." "Sit." "No." Wolfe looked at me. I moved casually between Shaw and the office door. He noticed. "This is unlawful." "Not yet," I said. Clara said, "Did you know about the envelope before today?" Shaw faced her. "No." "Did you know Edward's note was forged?" "No." "Did you know Eleanor Voss?" "Everyone at Horn's Bank knew her." "Did she trust you?" "That is irrelevant." Dean laughed without humor. "Everything is irrelevant when a banker answers." Shaw looked at him. You went to prison because you signed false records. I went because Hale vanished, Horn died, and you testified that I controlled the transfer forms. You did. I entered figures. I did not choose accounts. Wolfe raised one finger. Mr. Dean, when did you first see an imitation of Mr. Hale's handwriting? Dean's eyes moved back to the envelope. At the trial. The farewell note. Yes. Did you believe it genuine? No. Why? Hale wrote with his right hand. The note looked right, but it was too slow. The letters were drawn. Did you say so? My lawyer did. No one cared. Could you imitate Mr. Hale's hand? Dean's face hardened. I copied his instructions every day. I could imitate it well enough to fool a clerk. Clara turned toward him. You never told me. You never visited me. That is not true.
You came once. You asked whether Edward had taken the money.
You did not ask whether I had. Clara went pale. Wolfe said, Could you imitate my handwriting? Dean looked at the addressed envelope. With a sample and time, perhaps. Shaw said, There, you have your forger. Dean struck the floor once with his cane. I did not send it. But you cannot stop watching it, I said. His head came toward me. That envelope may contain the reason 6 years of my life disappeared, or something you expect to happen when Wolfe touches it. Dean's face changed slightly. Not guilt, recognition. Wolfe saw it too. He asked. Dean looked at Clara, then Shaw. I know. Hale kept contact poison in his office safe. Clara inhaled sharply. What kind? I asked. An experimental chemical used by one of Horn's manufacturing clients. Hale once warned me never to touch a cracked sample vial. Shaw said, This is absurd. Dean pointed at the envelope. If someone had that chemical, it could be on the wax or paper. I took one step away from the steel box, which was unnecessary but human, Clara whispered. Edward would never use poison. Dean looked at her. I did not say he did. Wolfe's voice was quiet. You knew the envelope might be dangerous, yet you came and asked me to open it. Dean stared at him. I came to stop you. You have been here 8 minutes and did not mention poison. I was not sure. You watched the envelope to see whether anyone touched it. Yes. Why not warn us? Immediately. Dean's mouth worked. Because if it was safe, I needed the confession. And if it was not, he looked down. Then I needed to know who wanted you dead. Shaw laughed again, but the sound was thinner. There is no poison. This is melodrama. Wolfe turned his eyes toward him. Then touch it. Shaw went still. The envelope remained inside the open steel box, 5 feet from his chair. Wolfe said, You are the only person who repeatedly questions my refusal. Demonstrate your confidence. Shaw's face tightened. I will not participate in theatrics. Nor will I. Clara looked from Shaw to the envelope. Dean leaned forward on his cane. No one moved. Fritz entered from the dining room. Dinner is ready, sir. Wolfe glanced at the clock. Hold it for 10 minutes. Fritz's expression showed the pain of a serious man asked to mistreat food, but he withdrew. Wolfe addressed the visitors. One of you wants Edward Hale's name cleared. One wants the theft confirmed. One wants his own conviction reversed. Those motives are plausible. They are also the motives the sender selected for you. You think we were brought here deliberately, Clara said. Yes, to witness your death, Dean asked. Possibly. Shaw said, You are making wild claims to avoid opening evidence that may expose your failure. Wolfe's gaze settled on him. Again, not what the envelope says, but what I must do with it. Shaw's face remained controlled. Wolfe continued. The sender needed 3 witnesses tied to the old case, Mrs. Hale would testify that the envelope offered vindication. Mr. Dean would testify that it exposed a frame. You, Shaw, would testify that I knowingly accepted Edward Hale's confession. For what purpose? To fix ownership. I do not understand. Someone threatens to release evidence under my name. Someone insists I touch and open the envelope publicly. Someone requires witnesses who can later swear that I accepted possession willingly. Clara said, Possession of what? Not merely a confession. I took the brass key marked 42 from my pocket and placed it on my desk. All 3 visitors saw it. Clara looked puzzled. Dean leaned forward. Shaw did neither. That was the most interesting reaction in the room. Wolfe asked, Do you recognize it, mister? Shaw, no, you did not look. I can see it from here. Then what number is engraved upon it? Shaw paused. 42. Wolfe's lips moved slightly. The number faced downward. Shaw's eyes went to the key. I had placed it exactly as Wolfe had instructed before the visitors arrived. The engraved side rested against the desk. Clara stared at Shaw. Dean slowly rose. Wolfe said, "You knew the number before entering this office." Shaw's face lost its polish. "That proves nothing. It proves you knew the envelope's contents." I guessed. "No." Wolfe leaned back. "You asked why I would not touch it, because you expected me to touch it. You knew the address imitated my hand, though your message did not say so. You knew the key bore the number 42, though it lay hidden." Shaw took one step toward the door. "I stepped with him," Wolfe said. "Sit, Mr. Shaw, we are not finished." Shaw looked around the room, measuring chances. Then he sat. Wolfe closed his eyes. "The three of you were summoned as witnesses, but only one arrived knowing the script. Outside, the wind pressed against the brownstone windows. The envelope remained untouched in the steel box. Clara Hale had come for her husband's name. Walter Dean had come for the years taken from him. Martin Shaw had come to make certain Nero Wolfe touched a lie. And now, for the first time that evening, he was no longer looking at the envelope. He was looking at the door. Chapter 4. The dust beneath the seal. Nathaniel Parker arrived at the brownstone carrying a black case, a wool scarf, and the expression of a man who preferred chemicals to people, because chemicals usually admitted what they were. He was not a police chemist. Wolfe had used him twice before, once to identify poison in a jar of imported honey, and once to prove that a dead man's shaving lotion had been replaced with industrial solvent. Parker charged heavily, spoke briefly, and disliked being hurried. Those qualities made him acceptable to Wolfe. Martin Shaw disliked him immediately. "This is unnecessary," Shaw said as Parker entered the office. "The envelope contains evidence concerning stolen trust funds, not a laboratory experiment." Parker removed his scarf. "Most dangerous objects are described as something else." Shaw's mouth tightened. Clara Hale sat near the bookshelves, with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Walter Dean remained in the chair farthest from Wolfe's desk, leaning on his cane and watching the steel dispatch box. His earlier warning about contact poison had changed the atmosphere. Even Fritz, who had brought fresh coffee, had placed the tray several feet from the envelope. Wolfe introduced no one. He pointed. "The envelope is there. It has been cut along the lower edge, but the flap and wax seal remain intact. Do not open it." Parker approached the desk. He stopped 2 feet away. "What has touched it?" "The messenger wore gloves," I said. "Fritz moved it with silver forks. I handled it only with tongs. The lower edge was cut with a steel letter knife. Anyone touch the wax? No. The paper? No bare skin." Parker opened his case. Inside were glass tubes, metal probes, folded cloths, small masks, and enough delicate equipment to make the office look temporarily scientific. He put on thin gloves and a clear face shield. Shaw gave a short laugh. "You expect it to explode." Parker did not look at him. "Explosions are noisy. Quiet things are often worse." I liked him. He lifted the envelope with padded forceps and placed it on a glass sheet. Then he examined the flap through a magnifying lens. "The seal is decorative," he said. Wolfe's brows rose. "Meaning, the wax does not secure the flap. It was applied after the adhesive dried, so the flap could be lifted without breaking the seal. Yes, if the adhesive were softened from beneath." Dean shifted in his chair. Parker angled the lamp toward the envelope. A faint line of pale dust appeared along the underside of the flap. Clara leaned forward. "What is that?" "Something that should not be there." Shaw stood. "This is absurd. Dust collects on paper, not beneath a sealed flap," Parker said. He took a narrow glass tube and attached it to a rubber bulb. Without opening the envelope, he drew a tiny sample from the edge of the flap. The powder was nearly invisible against the glass. Parker placed the tube into a small testing device and added 1 drop of clear liquid. The liquid turned light blue. His expression changed. "Interesting," Wolfe said. "That word is frequently used to delay an answer." Parker glanced at him. "This substance is not a conventional contact poison?" Dean asked. "Then it is safe?" "No." Parker opened another compartment in his case and removed a small metal plate with a controlled heating coil. He placed a grain of the powder on it and covered it with a glass chamber connected to a collection tube. "Move away from the desk," he said. We did. Even Shaw took 2 steps back, though he tried to make them look accidental. Parker switched on the coil. The powder warmed. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a thin mist formed inside the chamber. Parker drew it into a second tube, sealed it, and switched off the heat. "What does it do?" I asked. "I will need a full analysis for exact composition." But I recognized the reaction. From what? A family of synthetic sedative compounds developed for medical research. Stable when cool, volatile when warmed. Warmed by what? A lamp, radiator, or human hands? Clara looked at the envelope. "You mean holding it would activate the powder?" "Yes." "How quickly?" "Depending on quantity. Perhaps 20 to 40 seconds. And then Parker removed his gloves and replaced them with a fresh pair. The vapor would be inhaled by the person holding the envelope. At low exposure, it causes dizziness, confusion, and loss of coordination. At higher exposure, it causes unconsciousness. Death? Dean asked. Possible in a poorly ventilated room, especially with heart or breathing problems. But the amount here appears intended to disable, not necessarily kill. Wolfe's eyes became half-closed. Why place it beneath the flap? So opening the envelope releases the trapped vapors near the face. The hands warm the paper. The broken seal separates the layers. The person inhales immediately. I looked at Wolfe's wide hands resting on the arms of his chair. The sender had been very specific. Wolfe must receive it personally. Wolfe must open it before witnesses. Wolfe must touch it. Shaw said, "You said the amount may not be fatal." Parker turned toward him. "I said it may be intended to disable. Then the danger has been exaggerated." "No," Parker said. "Unconsciousness is dangerous even when temporary." Shaw looked at Wolfe. "The confession still has to be examined," I said. "You are showing admirable loyalty to evidence." He ignored me. "The powder has been identified. The envelope can now be opened by the chemist under controlled conditions." Wolfe regarded him. "You remain eager." "I remain interested in the truth. You were willing for me to open it before the danger was known." "I did not know there was danger." "You knew the number on the key hidden inside." Shaw's face hardened. "I have already explained that. You guessed a number you could not see. A coincidence. Coincidence has become overworked in this office." Parker resumed his examination. He inspected the wax seal, the paper fibers, and the inner edge visible through the cut at the bottom. "Another point," he said. Wolfe waited. "The powder is concentrated near the center of the flap. Whoever prepared this expected the recipient to lift it by hand after breaking the wax. The movement would release the greatest amount directly upward." "Toward the face," I said. "Yes." Dean gripped his cane. "Could the person wake later without remembering?" Parker looked at him. "Possibly. Confusion, broken memory, and false impressions are common after exposure." Wolfe opened his eyes fully. "There it is," I said. "What? The purpose?" Shaw frowned. Wolfe looked at the envelope. "The sender did not merely expect me to collapse. He expected me to awaken uncertain about what had occurred." Clara said, "Why? Would that matter?" "Because several witnesses would be present." Dean looked toward Shaw. Wolfe continued, "Imagine the scene. I receive the envelope publicly. I break the seal. I inhale the vapor and lose consciousness. During the confusion, someone removes or replaces an object. When I recover, witnesses testify that I personally opened Edward Hale's confession." "The key," I said. "Possibly. The old Horn confession. Possibly." Shaw said, "This is invention." "No," Wolfe replied. "The powder demands an event after unconsciousness. Otherwise, a simpler poison would suffice." Parker nodded. "He is right. The compound is useful when temporary incapacity is desired." Clara looked disturbed. "What could be placed in Mr. Wolfe's office while he was unconscious?" "Anything small enough," I said. "A forged document, stolen records, a weapon," Dean said, "or something could be taken." Wolfe's gaze moved to the locked compartment behind the legal books. The old case file, I understood. The sender knew Wolfe had preserved the original forged confession. The modern envelope could disable him while witnesses were present. In the confusion, someone might steal the old document and leave another in its place, or destroy it. Shaw sat again. "You are building a criminal plot around a chemical powder that has not been fully identified." Parker looked at him. "The reaction is clear enough. Could it have been placed accidentally? No. Could the messenger have added it? Not beneath a sealed flap. Could Goodwin?" I smiled. You are beginning to sound nervous. I am asking reasonable questions, Wolfe said. No, you are trying to scatter responsibility. Shaw faced him. You accused me because I recognized a number. I have accused no one. You have detained me here. The door is not locked. Shaw looked toward it. I remained between him and the hall. He said, then I am leaving. Wolfe's voice stopped him. Without seeing the confession opened, Shaw stood still. That was the question. For the first time since arriving, Shaw's desire to leave had to compete with his desire to remain. Clara saw it. So that is why you came, she said. Shaw turned. I came because my clients lost their money. You came because you knew what was in the envelope. I knew there might be a confession. You knew about the handwriting. You knew the key number. Now you insist the envelope be opened even after poison was found. It is not poison, Parker said. You may test that conclusion personally. Shaw's face flushed. Dean laughed once. Touch it, banker. Enough, Wolfe said. The room quieted. Parker returned the envelope to the glass sheet. I can neutralize the powder, he said. Cool the paper, draw off the vapor, and open the flap inside a sealed chamber. How long? I asked. 20 minutes, Wolfe said. Do it. Shaw relaxed slightly. Wolfe noticed. So, he said, you are relieved. I want the contents verified. The contents already removed through the lower edge consisted of a forged confession and a key. Why must the flap be opened? Shaw answered too quickly. There may be something concealed beneath the seal. Parker looked down at the envelope. I looked at Shaw. Wolfe's eyes narrowed to slits. You know there is. Shaw's face became blank. I said there may be. No, you supplied a location. Dean rose slowly. You put something under the wax. Shaw turned on him. Sit down. Dean leaned on his cane. You know how Horne's men hid account codes? Beneath seals, beneath labels, inside bindings. Clara stared at him. How do you know that? Dean did not answer. Wolfe said, examine the wax without removing it. Parker angled his lamp again. The seal bore a stamped H. Under magnification, the wax showed a faint straight edge beneath one side, as if a thin object had been pressed into it before it cooled. Parker used a narrow probe to test the edge. Something is embedded. Shaw's hands closed. What? I asked. Paper or film? Very thin. Wolfe looked at Shaw. The envelope itself was bait. The forged confession was bait. The key was bait. The powder was the mechanism. What lies beneath the seal is the object the sender needed placed in my hand before witnesses. Shaw said nothing. Clara whispered, What object? Wolfe leaned back. A record of ownership, perhaps. A bank code. A signature strip. Something small enough to conceal and important enough that my possession would matter. Dean looked at Shaw. The missing transfer authorization. Shaw's face changed. It was slight, but it was there. Wolfe saw it. So, he said softly. Shaw recovered. You are all guessing. Then you will not object to examination. I object to the destruction of evidence, Parker said. I can remove the wax intact. You may damage what is beneath it. That concern is oddly specific, I said. Shaw looked toward the door again. This time he took one step. I blocked him. He said, Move. No, you have no legal authority. True, but Kramer is due back. That was not true, but it was effective. Shaw stopped. Parker placed the envelope beneath the glass chamber and began cooling it with a controlled stream from a metal canister. Frost formed lightly along the paper. Wolfe watched without blinking. After several minutes, Parker drew the vapor into a sealed collector. He tested the air inside the chamber twice. Safe enough. Using a heated blade, he loosened the wax from beneath without breaking the stamped surface. The seal lifted as one piece. Under it lay a narrow strip of transparent film. Parker transferred it to a clean glass plate. Tiny numbers and signatures were visible. I brought the magnifying lens. The strip contained 3 account codes, a bank authorization number, and the lower half of a signature. Martin Shaw. Clara inhaled. Dean's cane struck the floor. Shaw did not move. Wolfe said, There is your eagerness. Shaw's voice was low. That proves nothing. It proves that a concealed banking record bearing your signature was placed under an envelope addressed to me, accompanied by instructions that I accept and open it publicly. The signature may be forged, perhaps. You said the other documents were forged. Yes. Then this may be too. Wolfe nodded. That is possible. But if it were merely intended to accuse you, you would welcome its discovery. Instead, you attempted to ensure I touched the envelope, inhaled the vapor, and became confused before the seal was examined. Shaw's face had gone pale. Parker sealed the film in a glass sleeve. Wolfe continued. The sender expected me to collapse. During the confusion, the strip could be removed and later found among my papers, or the original Horn confession could be stolen. Either would connect me publicly to concealed financial evidence from the Hale affair. Clara looked at Shaw. Did you steal the trust funds? No. Did you help Horn? No. Then why is your signature there? Shaw said nothing. Dean moved closer. You testified against me. I testified to the records. You made the records. Shaw's eyes hardened. Wolfe raised one hand. Mr. Dean, sit. We are not yet ready for violence or certainty. Dean returned to his chair. Wolfe looked at Parker. Can you determine whether the powder was recently manufactured? Perhaps. The stabilizer may identify the laboratory. Do so. And the film? Photograph it. Preserve it. Shaw said dead. I demand that it be turned over to the police. Wolfe's lips pushed out. You demanded that I open the envelope. Now you demand that the contents leave my office. Your concern changes direction but not intensity. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it. Kramer stood on the stoop with Pearlie Stebbins and Saul Panzer. Saul held a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. We opened locker 42, he said. Anything useful? He looked at me toward the office. Enough to make one of your visitors unhappy. I let them in. Behind me, Martin Shaw sat motionless, staring at the thin strip of film beneath Parker's glass. The envelope had been designed to make Wolfe collapse. Instead, it had opened a path through 18 years of forged handwriting, vanished money, and deliberate blame. The confession had never been the danger. The danger was what someone planned to do while Nero Wolfe could no longer speak. Chapter 5. The case Wolfe remembered. Wrong. Saul Panzer placed the parcel from locker 42 on Wolfe's desk, and Martin Shaw looked at it as a condemned man might look at a calendar. The parcel was 6 inches long, 4 inches wide, and wrapped in brown paper darkened by age. A railway storage label clung to one side. The number 42 had been written twice, once in faded blue pencil and once in fresh black ink. Kramer stood beside the red leather chair. Was anyone watching the locker? 2 men, Saul said. One in the waiting room, one near the newsstand. The first left when Archie's description of Shaw went out over the telephone. The second stayed until we removed the parcel. Did you follow him? I had Stebbins do it, Pearlie scowled. He went to Shaw and Leland Bank. Every eye in the office turned toward Shaw. He remained seated. That proves nothing, he said. You are getting good use from that sentence, I told him. Wolfe ignored us. He inspected the parcel without touching it. Mr. Parker, Nathaniel. Parker approached with fresh gloves and tested the wrapping for powder, vapor, and anything else a thoughtful enemy might add. After several minutes, he declared it safe enough to open. I cut the string. Inside was a narrow metal box containing a ledger page, 3 cancelled checks, a photograph, and a folded sheet covered in handwriting identical to Wolfe's. I recognized the hand at once. So did Wolfe. The document began. So as to say nothing to the Polis Regging the Second Trust account until I've examined the transfer records. It was signed Nero Wolfe, Clara Hale Rose. I remember that instruction. Wolfe's eyes moved to her. You received it? Yes. The day after Edward disappeared. From whom? Mr. Shaw. The banker's face tightened. Clara continued. He said you had sent it through the bank because our telephone might be watched. I sent no such instruction, Wolfe said. You denied it later. When? At my home 2 days afterward. Clara stared. No. You said the advice had been misunderstood. I said no such thing. For several seconds they looked at each other across 18 years. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, the old file. I unlocked the compartment behind the law books and brought out the grey folder. Wolfe directed me to the section containing his original correspondence with the Hale family. There were 7 pages in his hand. Brief instructions, names of accounts. Questions for Clara. A note warning that Edward Hale's office might be searched before the police obtained a warrant. I placed them beside the sheet from locker 42. The imitation was almost perfect. Almost, on Wolfe's genuine notes, the capital M began with a narrow vertical stroke. In the imitation, it began with a small hook. The same hook appeared on the envelope delivered that afternoon. I said, same forger. Wolfe grunted. I compared the forged instruction from locker 42 with the forged confession Wolfe had received after Caleb Horner's death. Both contained the hooked capital M. Both pressed too heavily on downward strokes. Both copied Wolfe's old habit of placing a period after initials. I looked at him. You had this proof for 18 years. No, it was in your file. No. This page was in the locker. The confession was in your file. Yes. And it carries the same defects. Yes. Then why didn't you connect it with the forged instruction Clara received? Because I never saw the instruction. Clara sat slowly. I kept it for months. Then where did it go? Mr. Shaw collected all correspondence relating to the trust accounts. He said the bank needed it for the audit. Shaw spoke. That was standard procedure, Wolfe. Looked at him. You had possession of a letter written in imitation of my hand. I had hundreds of papers. You had access to my genuine instructions. As family banker, yes. You had access to Edward Hale's accounts. Yes, to Caleb Horne's transfer records. Some, to the original trust documents. Copies. Dean struck the floor with his cane. You had everything. Shaw turned on him. So did Hale. So did Horne. So did you. I had figures after decisions were made. You had the decisions. Kramer picked up one of the cancelled checks. These are payable to Northbridge Advisory. For once, Kramer was not speaking as a wounded inspector, but as a policeman smelling money. Shaw said, a consulting firm. Owned by whom? I do not know. Dean laughed. You signed the checks. As trustee. Without knowing the owner. Bankers authorize payments based on proper documentation. Wolfe made a face. An admirable refuge. Kramer examined the ledger page. 3 trust transfers moved through Northbridge. Same dates as Hale's alleged thefts. Clara looked at Shaw. You told me Edward took those funds in cash. That was the audit conclusion. Your conclusion. The banks. Wolfe leaned back and closed his eyes. The office quieted. When he spoke, his voice was lower. I remembered the case incorrectly. That got everyone's attention. I said, you usually object when memory is accused. It deserves accusation. He opened his eyes. For 18 years I believed the forged note found in Edward Hale's study had been created to establish his flight. I believed the later imitation of my handwriting had been created to implicate me in Caleb Horne's destruction of records. Reasonable, Kramer said. No, incomplete. Wolfe tapped the forged instruction from locker 42. The forger had begun imitating my handwriting before Mr. Hale vanished. Clara nodded. You were advising us for nearly 3 weeks. Yes, Edward was frightened, she said. He believed someone inside the bank was altering the trusts. What written material of mine entered your house? Notes you sent after meetings, lists of questions, instructions for Edward. Who saw them? I did. Thomas sometimes carried them from the hall table. Mr. Shaw visited repeatedly. Shaw said, I was the family banker. You were also Horne's associate, Dean said. Business associate. Wolfe raised a finger. Mr. Shaw, when did you first meet me? During the Hale inquiry. Where? At Mrs. Hale's home. How many of my notes did you see? I do not remember. You remember the handwriting on today's envelope, though no message described it. Shaw's expression hardened. That point has been exhausted. Truth is not exhausted by repetition. I turned to Clara. Did anyone else collect Wolfe's notes? Eleanor Voss borrowed 2. She said. Horne wanted to compare them with Edward's account instructions. Did she return them? I do not know. Wolfe looked toward the fire. The field remains crowded. Kramer gave him a disgusted look. You have Shaw's signature hidden under the seal, a watcher going from locker 42 to his bank, access to the old papers, and trust records tied to his checks. What more do you want? A fact that distinguishes guilt from preparation. Preparation is part of guilt, sometimes. Sometimes it is part of a fraud. Shaw stared at Wolfe. You think I may be innocent. I think the envelope was constructed to point towards you. Dean objected. It carried his signature. Exactly, Clara said, but he knew the number on the key. Yes, Shaw seized it. Then you accept that someone is framing me. Wolfe regarded him. No. Your knowledge remains unexplained. I received an anonymous call. Convenient. It is true. Possibly. Kramer's patience began showing around the edges. You refuse to accuse the man every fact identifies. I refuse to reward the person who arranged those facts. Wolfe pushed the old confession toward me. Archie, read the final paragraph. I did. It claimed Wolfe had advised Horn to destroy records to protect the Hale family and avoid public scandal. Wolfe said at the time, "I treated this as an effort to injure me." "What else was it?" I asked. "An instruction." "To whom?" "To anyone who believed I possessed the missing records." I looked at the page again. "It suggested Horn gave you something." "Yes. The letter placed me between the records and the police. It encouraged someone to watch me." "Who?" "The person who had not found what Hale concealed." Clara said, "Edward hid the proof, perhaps." "The locker was empty when police searched it," Kramer said, "because the key they possessed was not the key used today." "I took the brass key from my pocket," Wolfe continued. "This key is modern. The metal and cutting are recent. Someone selected locker 42 because the number belonged to the old case." Parker nodded. "The surface wear is artificial. The key is no more than a year old." "Everything in the locker was planted." "Some of it," Wolfe replied. Kramer lifted the faded railway label. "This paper is old." "Yes, the Kant's checks are old." "Yes, the photograph." I picked it up. It showed Edward Hale standing outside his Brooklyn home with Clara and their young son. Martin Shaw stood at the edge of the frame, one hand on Hale's shoulder. On the back, in Hale's handwriting, were the words, "Martin knows where the second book is." Shaw gave a short, bitter laugh. "There," a planted accusation. Clara stared at the photograph. "I took that picture." "When?" Wolfe asked. 2 months before Edward vanished." "Did he write the words?" "I do not know." Dean leaned closer. "That looks like Hale's hand." Wolfe inspected it. "It is another imitation." "You tell?" Kramer asked. "The word second. Mr. Hale formed the first S from below. This writer began at the top." I said, "So somebody filled locker 42 with a collection designed to accuse Shaw." "Not merely accuse him," Wolfe said. "Then what?" "To make him act." Shaw looked up sharply. Wolfe saw it. "The envelope was not designed merely to harm me. The powder would incapacitate me, but only temporarily. The witnesses were summoned to create confusion. The key would lead to evidence implicating Mr. Shaw. The hidden signature would direct suspicion toward him, even before the locker was opened," Kramer said. "You think the sender wanted Shaw frightened?" "Yes." "Why?" "To force him to retrieve, destroy, or move something." "What?" "The genuine trust records." Shaw stood. "I have no such records." Wolfe's eyes remained steady. "I did not say you possessed them, but you implied it." "No," I said, "the wishes you to act as though you do." Dean looked at Shaw. "Do you?" "No," Clara said. "Edward trusted you." Shaw faced her. "He also accused me whenever he needed to hide his own theft." Wolfe raised his voice slightly. "Enough." Shaw sat again. Wolfe folded his hands. 18 years ago, someone studied my written instructions while I advised the Hale family. That person forged Hale's farewell note, forged an instruction to Mrs. Hale, and later forged a confession implicating me. I believed each forgery served a separate purpose. "But they were connected," I said. "Yes, they created a chain of authority. Hale appeared to confess. I appeared to protect Horn. Mrs. Hale appeared to conceal a second account. Each false document directed attention according to a plan." "Whose plan?" "Not yet." Kramer muttered something unfriendly. Wolfe continued. "Today's scheme repeats the method, but with one alteration. Instead of using forged handwriting only to create belief, the sender uses it to provoke action." "From Shaw?" I said. "Yes." "How?" "By making him fear that locker 42 contains evidence he failed to destroy 18 years ago." Shaw's face remained controlled, but his right hand had closed around the arm of his chair. I noticed. "So did Wolfe," Kramer said. "If Shaw is innocent, why would he fear old evidence? Innocence is not the only secret a banker may protect." Shaw rose again. "I have tolerated enough." This time he moved quickly toward the door. I blocked him. He stopped close to me. "Move," Wolfe said. "Let him go." I looked back. Wolfe repeated it. I stepped aside. Shaw hesitated. He had expected resistance. Permission disturbed him more. He took his coat from the hall and left the brownstone without another word. Kramer turned on Wolfe. "You let him walk?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because confinement would prevent him from acting." Kramer stared. "You are using him as bait." "No, the sender is using him as bait. I am observing the line." Wolfe looked at Saul. "Follow him, do not be seen." Saul left immediately. Clara rose. "Am I free to go too?" "Yes." Do you believe Edward stole the money? Wolfe considered her. I believe your husband discovered something dangerous. Whether he stole, fled, or died remains unsettled. Her face showed pain, but also relief that Wolfe had not offered comfort without truth. Dean stood with difficulty. What about me? You will remain. Why? Because the envelope was intended to make Mr. Shaw act, but someone had to know he would. Dean's eyes narrowed. You think I sent it? I think you recognized the danger before anyone else. I told you about the powder. After watching the envelope for 8 minutes, Dean gripped his cane. Wolfe said, sit. Clara left with Kramer's promise of an escort. Parker took the powder and film to his laboratory. Kramer remained. Dean returned reluctantly to his chair. At 8:15, the telephone rang. I answered. Saul's voice said Shaw went to his bank. He entered through the private side door. 10 minutes later, he came out, carrying a flat case. He is heading downtown. Follow. I am. I hung up and reported. Wolfe closed his eyes. Kramer said, now can I arrest him for carrying a case, for behaving guilty? That is not yet a crime. Dean watched Wolfe. Where is Shaw going? Wolfe opened his eyes. To the place the sender wished him to reveal. The office clock marked 8:17. 18 years earlier, Wolfe had believed the forged letters were meant to conceal Edward Hale's guilt. Now he understood that they had been written to control the people around it. The new envelope had done the same. It had frightened Clara, tempted Dean, endangered Wolfe, and driven Martin Shaw into the night, carrying whatever secret he had protected since Edward Hale disappeared. Someone had not merely revived the old case. Someone was directing its survivors toward the final act. Chapter 6. The confession that was never inside. Nathaniel Parker opened the envelope at 9:11 that night, inside a sealed glass chamber, and the confession Edward Hale had supposedly written was not there. What was there was a blank sheet of paper and a small brass key. That required explanation, since earlier I had cut the bottom edge and removed a forged confession, and the key marked 42. Parker supplied it while taking apart the envelope with tools delicate enough for brain surgery. The envelope has 2 compartments, he said. Kramer leaned closer to the glass and frowned. It looks like one. That was the intention. Parker pointed with a metal probe. A second layer of cream paper had been fitted against the front panel, creating a shallow pocket accessible through the lower edge. The forged confession and the modern locker key had occupied that pocket. The sealed inner compartment, protected by the poisoned flap, held the blank page and an older brass key. The confession was planted where it could be removed. Safely, I said. Yes, but the sender expected Wolfe to break the flap and reach the second compartment. Parker nodded. Wolfe sat behind his desk, glowering at the glass chamber, as if it had violated a rule of grammar. The forged confession was bait, he said. The locker key was another lure. Both were intended to be found before the envelope's true contents. Kramer looked at the blank sheet. You call that true contents? It is authentic in its emptiness. That sounds like something you say when you have nothing. Wolfe's eyes came toward him. I have a key. Parker removed it with forceps and placed it on a clean tray. It was smaller than the locker key, darkened by age, with a round bow and 3 shallow cuts along the blade. A number had been stamped near the base. There were also 2 letters, SL. Kramer said, safe deposit key. Wolfe nodded. Likely. Which bank? That is what the letters may indicate. Dean, who had remained in the office under protest, leaned forward on his cane. Shaw and Leland. Everyone looked at him. He shrugged. The bank used SL on its old deposit keys. Hale had a box there. You knew? Kramer asked. I carried papers to it twice. What box number? Dean stared at the key. 218. Kramer stood. That is enough for a warrant. Wolfe said, sit. I have a key to a box rented by a vanished man, in a bank tied to stolen trust funds. You have a key delivered by an unknown person inside a poisoned envelope. I can explain that to a judge, poorly. Kramer remained standing. Wolfe continued. Mr. Shaw left his bank carrying a flat case. Mr. Panzer is following him. If you arrive with policemen and a warrant, you will announce that the key has been found. So, whoever constructed this performance may still be waiting to see who acts. Dean said, you think Shaw is going to the box? No, Wolfe replied. If he could enter it freely, he would have emptied it years ago. The telephone rang, I answered. Saul said, Shaw has stopped at a private records warehouse on Hudson Street. He went inside with the case. 2 minutes later, another man entered through the loading entrance. Description? Tall, grey coat, face covered by a scarf. He walks with a slight limp. I looked at Dean. He sat motionless across the office, both hands on his cane. Dean is here, I said. This man is heavier. Stay with them, I hung up and reported. Kramer said, now we have a meeting. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Can I go now? Yes, quietly. Take Stebbins and no uniformed officers. Do not enter unless Mr. Panzer requests assistance. Kramer left with unusual speed. Dean watched him go. What does this have to do with Hale's box? Wolfe looked at the brass key. Everything, possibly. Parker completed his examination of the blank sheet. Under ordinary light it showed nothing. Under ultraviolet light it remained blank. Heat revealed no writing. Chemical vapor produced no hidden message. It is simply paper, Parker said. No, replied. Parker's brows rose. Wolfe said, its purpose was to occupy space and preserve the shape of a confession. The sender wanted the envelope to feel as though it contained a letter. I said, so nobody ever intended us to read Hale's final words, correct? The advertised confession never existed. Dean's mouth tightened. Then the whole thing was a trick to deliver the deposit key. And to make its delivery public, Wolfe said. Why poison Wolfe? To create confusion while someone obtained the key. Dean looked toward the office door. Sure, perhaps. You still refuse to accuse him. I refuse to let eagerness substitute for proof. At 9:40, Clara Hale telephoned. Her voice was strained. Mr. Goodwin, has Martin returned? Returned where? He left some time ago. I called his office. They said he had gone out carrying old files. Why are you asking? She hesitated. Because a policeman came to my apartment. What policeman? He showed no badge. He asked whether Edward's deposit box still existed. I straightened. When? What did he look like? Tall grey coat. His face was partly covered. Did he limp a little? What did you tell him? Nothing. Did he enter? No. The doorman refused. Stay inside. Lock the door. I'll send someone. I hung up and called Fred Durkin, gave him Clara's address and told him not to discuss literature with strangers. Then I faced Wolfe. Clara knew about the box. His eyes narrowed. How recently? I called her again and asked. This time she admitted it. 3 weeks earlier, while arranging changes to her will, she had found an old bank receipt among Edward's papers. It listed safe deposit box 218 at Shaw and Leland Bank. She had telephoned the bank and asked whether the box still existed. Who answered? I asked. A young clerk. He placed me on hold. Then Mr. Shaw came to the telephone. What did you tell him? That I had found the receipt. What did he say? That the box had been closed after Edward disappeared. Did you believe him? I did then. Why didn't you mention this earlier? I was ashamed. If the box contained money, it would make Edward look guilty. Did you tell anyone else? My son Thomas. Where is he? Boston. He has not been in New York for months. I told her to remain with Fred until she heard from us. Wolfe listened with his eyes closed. When I finished, he said, Mrs. Hale's inquiry revived the box and alerted Shaw. Yes, then Shaw sent the envelope. Not necessarily. Dean gave an impatient grunt. Who else knew the bank clerk? Anyone who heard the internal inquiry. Mrs. Hale's son. Possibly whoever has watched the Hale family for 18 years. Parker packed his equipment. Before leaving, he gave me the deposit key in a sealed evidence sleeve and warned me not to put it in my mouth. I told him that had not been planned. At 10:14, Saul telephoned again. Shaw came out of the warehouse alone. The other man left through the rear with the flat case. Did you follow? Stebbins has Shaw. I stayed with the case. Where is it going? Back toward Midtown in a black sedan. Plate? He gave it to me. I wrote it down. Wolfe said, have Mr. Panzer follow. Do not intercept. I relayed the instruction. Dean looked bewildered. You are letting evidence disappear. We do not know it is evidence. What else would Shaw carry from his bank to a secret meeting? Something he wished another person to believe was evidence. Wolfe turned toward me. Archie, telephone Shaw and Leland Bank. Ask for the night custodian. I did. After 3 transfers and 1 conversation with a man who believed midnight began at 9, I reached a custodian named Amos Reed. He confirmed that the old safe deposit vault still existed beneath the main banking floor. Box 218 remained in place. Rented to whom? I asked. I can't give that information. Edward Hale. Silence. Mr. Hale. He is standing beside me. Dean's eyebrows went up. The custodian lowered his voice. Mr. Hale disappeared 18 years ago. That is why he is tired. Wolfe gestured impatiently. I said, was the box ever closed? No, that came before caution returned. Has anyone entered it recently? I cannot say. Could Martin Shaw enter? Not without both keys. Both? The customer key and the bank guard key. Who controls the guard key? The vault manager. Who was vault manager 18 years ago? Another silence. Mr. Shaw. Who is it now? Mr. Shaw still supervises private legacy boxes. I thanked him and hung up. Dean said, then Shaw could enter only with the customer key, I replied. Wolfe looked at the key in its sleeve, which he did not possess, unless he made a copy. Old deposit locks resist ordinary copies. He would have required the original or a mold. Dean pointed at the envelope. There it is. Yes, Wolfe said. Someone has now supplied the missing key to us. To a room containing Mr. Shaw. I saw it. The 3 visitors were called because the sender expected Shaw to be here when the envelope opened. Precisely. And if you collapsed, Shaw could take the key during the confusion, or be seen taking it. Dean frowned. Why would someone want him seen? To force him to explain his interest in box 218. At 10:30, Kramer returned. He had not entered the warehouse. Stebbins was following Shaw, who had gone home empty-handed. Kramer examined the key. I have a judge waiting. Wolfe nodded. Now obtain the warrant. That surprised him. What changed? We know the box remains active. Mr. Shaw supervises the vault, and Mrs. Hale's recent inquiry warned him of its existence. We also know someone attempted to deliver the customer key in his presence. Kramer reached for the telephone. Wolfe added, Mrs. Hale must accompany us. Use, Archie, Mr. Kramer and Mrs. Hale. I shall remain here. I looked at the clock. The bank is closed. A bank closes only for customers. Mr. Kramer will persuade it to open. Kramer did. At 11:20, Clara Hale, Kramer, Stebbins, and I stood in the private vault beneath Shaw and Leland Bank. The walls were polished stone, the lights were white and cold, and hundreds of brass doors waited in exact rows. Martin Shaw arrived with the bank's attorney. He looked tired but controlled. This search is improper, he said. Kramer showed him the warrant. Shaw read it. Box 218 is rented to Edward Hale. His ownership has never been legally terminated. Clara said, I am his wife. You are not authorized to enter, Kramer said. The court is. Shaw looked at the sealed key sleeve in my hand. You found it, I smiled. You knew it was missing. His face changed, but only slightly. The vault custodian inserted the bank guard key. I inserted Hale's key. Both turned. The door opened. Inside was a long metal container, covered with dust except for a clean patch near the handle. Someone had touched it recently. The custodian pulled it out and placed it on a table. Kramer opened it. There were 4 ledgers, a packet of trust documents, 6 letters, and a photograph of Edward Hale with his wife and son. Clara made a small sound. The first ledger contained the original trust balances. The second showed transfers into Northbridge Advisory. The third identified the person controlling Northbridge, Martin Shaw. The entries were supported by cancelled checks, authorization slips, and private account codes matching the strip hidden beneath the envelope's wax seal. Kramer looked at Shaw. You stole the money? No. Your name is in every book. Those ledgers could be forged. I opened the fourth. It was in Edward Hale's hand, not an imitation. The writing was rapid, uneven, and full of private abbreviations no outsider would bother copying. Each entry recorded Shaw's instructions, the accounts he used, and the dates he removed funds from the trusts. Clara stood beside me, reading over my shoulder. Edward knew. Yes. At the bottom of the box lay a sealed letter addressed to her. The paper had aged yellow around the edges. Clara's hands shook, so I opened it with Kramer watching. The letter was short. Edward wrote that he had discovered Shaw's theft and intended to give the ledgers to Nero Wolfe. Before he could do so, Shaw had shown him photographs of Clara and Thomas and threatened to have them killed if the records reached the police. Hale had decided to disappear until his family could be moved safely. Eleanor Voss had agreed to help him leave New York. The final lines read, I did not take the money. I took the blame because Martin made the price of truth your lives. When you are safe, I will return. Clara read those words twice. He never returned. No one answered. Shaw said, that letter proves nothing. Hale could have written it to excuse his flight. Kramer turned on him. It names accounts only the thief knew. Hale managed them. It names Northbridge as yours. A lie. I looked at the dust on the container. Who opened this box recently? The custodian examined the access register. His finger stopped. 3 weeks ago. Name? He looked at Shaw. Mr. Shaw. Clara fixed him. You told me the box had been closed. Shaw's expression finally broke. I inspected it after your inquiry. With what customer key? I asked. He said nothing. Kramer stepped closer. You had a copy? No. Then how did you open it? Shaw looked toward the vault door. Stebbins stood there. The exit was no longer attractive. I examined the lock. A faint, fresh scratch marked its face. Shaw had probably used a bank override tool, or arranged for the customer side to be bypassed. But if he had opened the box 3 weeks earlier, why leave the ledgers? I looked at Wolfe's logic from the office. Someone wanted Shaw to act. Someone knew the box contained evidence. Someone sent a key, a poisoned envelope, and 3 witnesses. I turned to Clara. Was this letter on top when the box opened? Yes. And the clean patch on the handle was fresh. Kramer caught up. Shaw opened it but didn't remove the records. Because they were not here then, I said. Shaw stared at me. The ledgers had been placed inside after his secret inspection. The anonymous sender had used Edward Hale's box as a stage, Kramer said. By whom? That is the next chapter. He did not appreciate the phrase. I collected the ledgers, letters, and access register under the warrant. Shaw was taken to headquarters for questioning, but Wolfe's warning stayed with me. The evidence proved Shaw stole the trust funds. It proved he threatened Edward Hale's family. It proved Hale fled because he feared for Clara and Thomas. But it did not prove Shaw had sent the envelope. In fact, the timing suggested the opposite. Someone had discovered that Clara's inquiry frightened Shaw into opening box 218. After he found it empty, that person placed the ledgers inside, delivered the key to Wolfe, and built a trap designed to make Shaw expose himself. At 12:45, I returned to the brownstone with the metal container. Wolfe was waiting in the office with beer, cold chicken, and an empty chair for facts. I gave him the report. When I finished, he said, so, Mr. Shaw is a thief, a blackmailer, and likely responsible for Mr. Hale's flight. Yes, but not necessarily our correspondent. No, the confession was never inside the envelope. Only a blank sheet and the key. Wolfe poured beer. Then the sender did not wish to tell us what Edward Hale had done. He wanted us to find what Shaw had done. More than what? He wanted Mrs. Hale to read her husband's letter. I looked at the ledgers. So this is revenge? Perhaps justice? Perhaps. Who had the records? Wolfe took a slow drink. The person who helped Edward Hale disappear. Eleanor Voss. His eyes met mine. Find her. Chapter 7. The person who needed it opened. At 9 the next evening, the empty envelope sat beneath the glass cover on Wolfe's desk like a trapped insect. The powder had been removed. The blank sheet, both brass keys, the forged confession, and the strip bearing Martin Shaw's signature were arranged on my desk in separate evidence sleeves. Nathaniel Parker had certified that none of them could now put a man to sleep unless he tried reading the bank records aloud. Wolfe had ordered 5 chairs placed in the office. All 5 were occupied. Clara Hale sat nearest the bookshelves, holding Edward's 18-year-old letter in both hands. Walter Dean leaned on his cane beside her. Peter Lang, the bicycle messenger, perched near the door and looked unhappy about being included among bankers, poison, and old fraud. Parker sat beside my desk with his black laboratory case at his feet. Martin Shaw had been brought from headquarters by Kramer and Pearlie Stebbins. He was not under formal arrest for the envelope. He was being held for questioning regarding the stolen trusts and his unauthorized entry into Edward Hale's safe deposit box. His polished manner had survived, but it now resembled a fine coat worn after a street fight. Kramer stood near the globe. Wolfe entered from the elevator at 9 sharp, crossed to his chair, and lowered himself into it. He arranged the ends of his yellow shirt cuffs, looked at the glass cover, and then inspected the gathering. Mr. Shaw, he said, you wished the envelope opened. You now have another opportunity to observe it. Shaw's mouth tightened. You have already opened it. No, Mr. Parker opened it. A distinction without value. On the contrary, it ruined your plan. Clara looked at Wolfe. You told Archie that the person who sent the envelope might be the one who helped Edward escape. I said that person possessed the strongest opportunity to preserve the records. I did not say that person sent the envelope. You told him to find Eleanor Voss. Yes. Did he? I answered. No, not yet. That was true. I had found evidence that Eleanor had lived for several years under another name in Connecticut, but the trail ended 12 years earlier. Wolfe had ordered me not to reveal the name until he was ready to use it. Shaw leaned back. You assembled us to offer another theory. No, Wolfe said. I assembled you because theories are no longer required. Peter Lang raised a hand slightly. Am I going to be here long? Wolfe looked at him. You delivered the envelope. I didn't put anything in it. No one has accused you. Captain Kramer asked me the same questions 3 times. Kramer grunted. Wolfe said, You will remain until I finish. Lang lowered his hand. Wolfe pointed toward the glass cover. That envelope was addressed in an excellent imitation of my handwriting. The messenger was instructed that I must receive it personally and open it before 6 o'clock. A separate message claimed it contained Edward Hale's final confession. 3 people connected to the old affair were summoned to witness the opening. Clara said, I was told it would clear Edward. Mr. Dean was told it would clear him. Mr. Shaw was told it concerned money belonging to his clients. Dean's hand tightened on his cane, a neat collection. Deliberately chosen, Wolfe said. Each of you had a reason to seize the contents if I became unable to control them. Shaw said, No one seized anything, because I declined to touch it. Parker opened his case and removed a written report. The powder under the flap was designed to become volatile when warmed by the hands, he said. Breaking the seal would release vapor close to the face. The likely effects were dizziness, confusion, and unconsciousness. Lang stared at the envelope. I carried that across town. You wore gloves, I said. I take them off indoors. You were told not to let anyone except Wolfe receive it. Lang's face changed as the significance reached him. Wolfe said, The sender expected the envelope to remain cool during delivery. Mr. Lang traveled by bicycle in winter air. The substance would remain harmless until I held the paper long enough to break the seal. Clara looked at Shaw. You knew. Shaw met her eyes. I knew nothing about powder. Wolfe said, But you knew the envelope required contact. I asked why you refused to open it. Repeatedly. That was ordinary impatience. No. Wolfe leaned back. Mrs. Hale watched the envelope because she believed it contained her husband's vindication. Mr. Dean watched it because he suspected danger. You watched me. Shaw gave a short laugh. An impressive difference. You did not ask first what the confession said. You asked why I would not touch the envelope. When the poison was discovered, you still insisted that it be opened. When the first key was removed, you knew its number, although the engraved side was against the desk. I have explained that. Badly. Kramer said, You claimed an anonymous caller gave you the number. Yes. Telephone records show no such call reached your office that afternoon. Shaw turned toward him. Your records are incomplete. No, your story is. Wolfe lifted one finger. The key marked 42 opened a parcel locker containing documents arranged to implicate you. That was not the true key. It was bait placed in the envelope's false outer compartment, where it could be removed without breaking the poisoned seal. Dean frowned. Then why plant evidence against himself? To direct us toward the old bank records without revealing the true destination too soon, Clara said. But the papers in locker 42 carried his name. Yes, they were intended to be discovered and dismissed as planted accusations. They prepared us to regard the next evidence with caution. Shaw said, You are claiming I framed myself so you would later believe the real proof. No, you framed yourself to control the order in which we found it. The office went quiet. Wolfe continued. You had learned that Mrs. Hale had asked whether Edward's safe deposit box still existed. You entered box 218 3 weeks ago. The bank register shows that, Craver said. Shaw's voice remained steady. I inspected an abandoned account. You found the box empty, Wolfe said. I glanced at him. That matched what I had inferred in the vault. Shaw said nothing. Wolfe went on. You had emptied it 18 years ago after Edward Hale vanished. You removed the trust ledgers but did not destroy them. Clara stared at him. Why keep them? Insurance, Wolfe replied. They implicated Caleb Horn, Walter Dean, and possibly others. Mr. Shaw believed they might protect him if one accomplice attempted betrayal. Dean struck the floor with his cane. I was no accomplice. You signed transfer forms without understanding their full purpose. Mr. Shaw could still use them against you. Dean looked at Shaw with open hatred. Wolfe said, when Mrs. Hale's inquiry revived interest in the box, Mr. Shaw faced a problem. The records had to be returned in a manner that made their discovery appear accidental and their custody uncertain. Kramer frowned. Why return evidence proving he stole the money? Because another person had obtained copies. Every head turned toward Wolfe. Eleanor Voss? Clara asked. Yes. Shaw's composure slipped, only slightly, but it was enough. Wolfe saw it. Miss Voss helped Edward Hale leave New York, he said. Before doing so, she copied portions of the ledgers and retained Edward's letter to his wife. Later, she approached Mr. Shaw and demanded that he restore the stolen funds to the surviving trusts. Kramer said, blackmail? Restitution under threat. The legal distinction may interest others. Where is she? Dead. Clara closed her eyes. Wolfe continued. She died 12 years ago under the name Eleanor Vane. Her executor was instructed to send a packet to Edward Hale's son if Martin Shaw failed to make annual payments into 3 family accounts. I had found those payments that afternoon. They had been disguised as trust adjustments, but they began 12 years ago, the year Eleanor died. Kramer looked at Shaw. You were paying the money back. In small portions, Wolfe said. Enough to delay the release of the copied evidence. But Mrs. Hale's recent question concerning Box 218 threatened to reveal the original theft before the repayment was complete. Clara stared at Shaw. You let me believe Edward was a thief while you quietly returned what you stole. Shaw said nothing. Wolfe's voice hardened. Mr. Shaw therefore constructed a performance. He returned the original ledgers and Edward's letter to Box 218. He needed the customer key to be discovered, but he could not retrieve or publicly produce it himself. Kramer asked, why not? Because the bank's records would connect him to the box. If he presented the missing key, he would have to explain how he obtained it and why he knew the box still contained evidence. I said, so he sent it to Wolfe. Yes. Shaw shook his head. That is absurd. If I wanted the box found, I could have mailed the key to Mrs. Hale. That would connect her directly to the discovery and might prompt her to ask why the bank had lied about the box being closed. You needed an independent and famous custodian. Wolfe tapped the arm of his chair. You chose me because I had publicly doubted Edward Hale's original confession. If I opened a new confession before witnesses and then produced the deposit key, the discovery would appear to be the final act of an old investigation. Clara looked at the envelope. But why drug him? To remove control from him at the proper moment, Wolfe said. Dean spoke quietly, while one of us took the confession. Exactly. Wolfe looked at Clara. You would reach for a document promising to clear your husband. Then he looked at Dean. You would reach for proof that you had been framed. Dean nodded reluctantly. Either of you might seize the apparent confession when I collapsed. In the confusion, the true key from the inner compartment would be discovered. And Shaw? Kramer asked. Shaw would remain a witness. He would protest the handling of the evidence, demand police custody, and later claim the ledgers had been placed in the box by Edward Hale. Shaw said, if that was my intention, why include proof against myself? Because you believed you could survive fraud better than murder or attempted murder. That landed. Clara looked at Wolfe. Murder? The powder might have killed him, Parker said. The dose was uncertain. Wolfe's eyes remained on Shaw. You calculated that I would recover. You required only several minutes of helplessness and confusion. You trusted the chemist who supplied the substance. Parker said, the stabilizer came from a private laboratory owned by Northbridge Medical Holdings. Kramer turned. Northbridge. The same shell organization used in the trust thefts, Wolfe said. Its current director is an employee of Shaw and Leland Bank. Shaw's face had gone pale. That still does not prove I prepared the envelope. Peter Lang shifted in his chair. I can prove the man who hired me knew you. Everyone looked at him. Wolfe said, "Explain." Lang swallowed. "I didn't remember until Mr. Goodwin showed me photographs this afternoon. The man wore a hat low and had a scarf, but when he paid me, his right glove pulled back. He wore a ring with a black square stone." Kramer looked at Shaw's hands. Shaw wore no ring. "I took a photograph from my pocket and handed it to Lang. It showed Shaw at a charity dinner 6 months earlier. On his right hand was a black onyx ring." "That's it," Lang said. "Same ring," Shaw replied. "Hundreds of men own such rings." Lang looked at him. "The voice is the same too." Shaw's head turned sharply. The messenger continued. "You spoke quietly at the station, rougher, like you had a cold, but it is you." Kramer moved closer to Shaw. Wolfe said, "Mr. Lang's identification is useful, but not decisive. Your conduct is." "My conduct?" "You alone required the envelope opened immediately, because you alone knew the key was inside." Shaw pointed toward Clara. "She wanted it opened. She wanted the confession read. Mr. Dean wanted proof examined. You cared about the physical act. That is wordplay. No, it is motive exposed through language." Wolfe's voice became sharper. "When poison was discovered, a blameless man would have feared the envelope. You feared delay. When the key marked 42 appeared, a blameless man would have asked what it opened. You already knew. When the true deposit key was found, you claimed the box had been closed. You knew it remained active because you had entered it 3 weeks earlier." Shaw rose. Stebbins moved behind him. Shaw remained standing. "You cannot prove placed the records in the box after I inspected it. The dust can." He stared. I said, "The container showed a clean handprint." Parker examined the residue. "It contained the same rare polishing compound used on the leather gloves found in your private bank office." Parker nodded. "And a paper fiber from the poisoned envelope was caught beneath the container latch." That part was new to Shaw. His face showed it. Wolfe said, "You prepared the envelope and handled the metal container during the same interval. The transfer was careless because you believed no one would examine dust beneath a seal or fibers beneath a latch." Clara stood. "Where is Edward?" Shaw looked at her. She repeated it. "You threatened us. He fled because of you. Where did he go?" Shaw's eyes shifted away. Wolfe answered, "Edward Hale died 14 years ago in Oregon under an assumed name." Clara closed her eyes. "I had found the death certificate and a letter from Eleanor's files. Hale had lived 4 years after leaving New York. He had planned to return, but illness stopped him. Eleanor had preserved his evidence and his final letter." Clara sat again slowly. Wolfe said, "Mr. Shaw knew of his death. Eleanor Voss informed him when she began demanding repayment. Therefore he knew no living Edward Hale could contradict the false confession." Kramer stepped beside Shaw. "You are under arrest for attempted poisoning, fraud, theft, obstruction, and whatever else the district attorney adds after breakfast." Shaw looked at Wolfe. "You think you have won because you did not touch an envelope. No." Wolfe's gaze went to the empty paper beneath the glass. "You lost because you needed it opened." Stebbins took Shaw's arm. Shaw resisted only with words. "You cannot build a conviction from questions." "No," Wolfe said, "but questions revealed where to find the answers." Kramer and Stebbins took him out. Peter Lang followed after being told he would give a full statement downtown. Parker packed his case. Dean remained beside Clara. For a moment no one spoke. Then Dean said, "The ledgers clear me. They establish that you did not control the stolen accounts." Wolfe replied, "Your conviction may be reviewed." Dean looked down at his cane. 6 years, yes, that is all you have to say. No sentence can return them." Dean nodded once. It was not forgiveness, but it was the end of an argument. Clara folded Edward's letter carefully. "He did not abandon us. No. He should have trusted me." "Yes." Wolfe said it without comfort, which made it kinder. "After they left, I removed the glass cover and placed the empty envelope in the evidence folder." Wolfe watched me. "You may touch it now," he said. "Your confidence overwhelms me. Powder is gone. So is Shaw. Temporarily. The state will arrange permanence." I sat at my desk. "You knew Shaw was the sender before the meeting." "I knew he was the only visitor who desired an action rather than information." His repeated demands. "Yes, you once said the envelope was designed to make another person act. It was. Mrs. Hale or Mr. Dean had to seize the apparent confession. Mr. Shaw needed an innocent hand to discover the key. And when you refused to collapse, He was forced to keep demanding that I provide the missing step. I looked at the envelope. It had contained no confession, only a blank page and a route to the truth. Shaw had studied handwriting, arranged witnesses, hidden poison beneath wax, and trusted that greed, grief, and old guilt would perform exactly as he intended. He had prepared for every person in the room, except Nero Wolfe. Wolfe reached for the bell to summon Fritz. The scheme was elaborate, I said. It was vain. Because Shaw wanted to control the scene. Because he believed the contents of an envelope were more important than the person most eager to see it opened. Fritz entered to announce dinner. Wolfe rose. On the desk behind him, the empty envelope no longer looked dangerous. It looked disappointed. Chapter 8. Wolfe's Unfinished Case. The final meeting began at 9 the next evening, with Martin Shaw insisting that the evidence against him had been manufactured. That was not an unusual position for a prisoner, but Shaw delivered it with the injured dignity of a banker whose signature had been questioned on a holiday check. He sat in the yellow chair at the end of Wolfe's desk, with Pearlie Stebbins behind him, and Inspector Kramer near the office door. Clara Hale occupied the red leather chair. Walter Dean sat beside the bookshelves, his black cane resting across his knees. Nathaniel Parker had placed his chemical report on my desk. Peter Lang, the bicycle messenger, stood near the globe, looking more nervous than he had when he first delivered the envelope. The envelope itself was back beneath the glass cover. It was empty, harmless, and still managed to hold everyone's attention. Wolfe entered from the elevator at 9 sharp, crossed the office, and lowered himself into his chair. He inspected the gathering, adjusted one cuff, and looked at Shaw. "You requested another opportunity to deny the evidence." Shaw's mouth tightened. "I requested an opportunity to answer an absurd accusation. Then answer when required," Kramer said. "He has been answering since yesterday." "Badly," Wolfe replied. Shaw turned toward the police commissioner, who had arrived without announcement, and now sat in a straight-backed chair near Kramer. "I am being held because of an old account dispute, a forged signature strip, and the memory of a messenger who saw a stranger for less than a minute." The commissioner said nothing. Wolfe leaned back. "You are being held because 18 years ago you stole money from 3 family trusts, placed the theft upon Edward Hale, threatened his wife and child, and used Walter Dean's signatures to support false transfer records. That is unproved. Let's prove it. They were placed in the deposit box recently. By you." Shaw shook his head. "You have no witness to that." "Correct. We have dust, paper fibers, bank records, chemical purchases, your own conduct, and a witness who identifies you as the sender of the envelope. One witness is useful. Agreement among independent facts is better." Peter Lang shifted his feet. Wolfe looked at him. "Mr. Lang, describe the man who hired you." Lang swallowed. "About 5 feet 10, dark overcoat, grey hat, scarf over the lower part of his face, brown gloves. He spoke quietly and sounded like he had a cold." "Did you see his face?" "Part of it." "Did you see his hands?" "His right glove pulled back when he paid me. He had a black ring with a square stone." I placed a photograph on Wolfe's desk. It showed Shaw leaving a bank dinner 6 months earlier. On his right hand was a black onyx ring. Lang pointed. "That one." Shaw gave a short laugh. "A common ring." Lang faced him. "It was not only the ring. It was your voice. You heard me speak in this office after being shown my photograph. I heard you yesterday before Mr. Goodwin showed it to me." Shaw looked at me. "That is false." "No," I said. "I had Lang wait behind the front room door while you argued about the envelope. He heard you for 7 minutes before seeing your photograph. That had been Wolfe's idea. He preferred identification when the witness's memory had not been invited to please anyone." Lang continued. "When you said, 'Why will you not touch it?' I knew the voice. The man at the station kept saying Mr. Wolfe had to touch the envelope himself." Shaw looked toward Kramer. "You coached him," Kramer said. "I have coached better material." Wolfe raised one finger. "Mr. Lang's identification is not the foundation. It is one stone." He looked at Parker. "The chemical." Parker opened his report. "The powder beneath the flap contained a heat-sensitive sedative compound developed by Northbridge Medical Holdings." Shaw said Northbridge is a large company. "No," Parker replied. "It is a small holding concern with 3 inactive laboratories and 1 purchasing office." Many people could order chemicals. This compound was purchased under a research authorization signed by Martin Shaw as corporate trustee. Shaw stared at him. Parker continued. The order was placed 6 weeks ago. The quantity was small. The receiving address was a private document storage room leased by Shaw and Leland Bank. Kramer said, the same warehouse Shaw visited after leaving Wolfe's office. Yes, Parker said. Shaw folded his arms. A corporate signature does not prove personal use. No, Wolfe replied. But the stabilizing agent in the envelope matched the residue found inside a mixing vial, recovered from your private storage case. Shaw's composure slipped, only for a second. The commissioner asked. Where was the case found? Kramer answered. In the records warehouse. Saul Panzer followed the man who carried it away. We recovered it from a rented automobile after the driver abandoned it near Columbus Circle. Driver identified, an employee of Shaw's bank. He is cooperating. Shaw turned sharply. You have no right to question my employees without counsel, Kramer said. He had his own counsels. Wolfe glanced toward the glass-covered envelope. The powder had a narrow purpose. It was not intended primarily to kill me. It was intended to make me collapse and awaken confused after witnesses had seen me open a document attributed to Edward Hale. Clara Hale looked at the envelope. You wanted me to take it, she said to Shaw. He did not answer. Wolfe did. Yes. Mrs. Hale would have reached for a confession promising to clear her husband. Mr. Dean would have reached for proof that he had been framed. Either hand would have discovered the deposit box key, while Mr. Shaw remained apparently detached. Dean's grip tightened on his cane. You wanted me blamed again. Shaw faced him. You were convicted because you signed false forms. I signed figures you supplied. You admitted guilt. After 4 days of questioning and a promise that I would serve 1 year, I served 6. Wolfe's voice ended the exchange. The ledgers established that Mr. Dean entered transactions but did not control the accounts. They also established that Edward Hale did not steal the trust funds. Clara closed her eyes briefly. For 18 years she had lived with uncertainty. Relief did not erase those years. It only gave them a different name. Wolfe continued. Mr. Hale discovered that Mr. Shaw had transferred trust funds into Northbridge Advisory, a company Shaw secretly controlled. He prepared copies of the records and intended to bring them to me. Shaw said, that is based on a letter whose authenticity is questionable. Clara opened her handbag. No. She removed a thin packet tied with faded blue ribbon. Every face in the office turned toward it. I had not seen the packet before. Wolfe had, he said. Proceed, Mrs. Hale. She untied the ribbon. Edward wrote to me after he left New York. Shaw went still. Kramer leaned forward. Clara held up 3 letters. They came from different countries and under different names. He warned me never to show them while Thomas was a child, he said. Martin Shaw had men watching our house. Why did you conceal them from the police? The commissioner asked. Because the first letter contained details only Edward and I knew, he said. If I approached the police, Shaw would harm our son. Her voice remained steady, but her fingers trembled against the old paper. He told me he had not stolen anything. He had found the trust records and given copies to Eleanor Voss. He said he had fled because Shaw showed him photographs of Thomas walking to school. Dean looked at Shaw. Shaw looked at no one. Clara unfolded the last letter. This came 11 years ago from Lisbon. Edward was ill. He wrote that he did not expect to live long enough to return. Earlier evidence had indicated Oregon, but the letters clarified the sequence. Hale had spent several years moving under false names, including time in Oregon, before leaving the country. The death certificate Wolfe had obtained there belonged to an alias Edward had abandoned, not to Hale himself. Clara read the final lines. He wrote, "Do not approach the deposit box while Shaw is watching. If the old case is ever reopened, take the key to Nero Wolfe. He was the only man who knew my confession was false." The office was silent. Wolfe's eyes closed for a moment. Clara continued. Edward died in Portugal 2 months later. Eleanor sent me confirmation. I kept the letters because he asked me to protect Thomas. Kramer said, "Why ask the bank about the box 3 weeks ago?" My son is grown. I was changing my will, and I found Edward's old receipt. I thought Shaw might be dead or retired. I did not know he still controlled the bank. And when he answered the telephone himself? I asked. I became frightened. I told no one except Thomas, Wolfe said. Your inquiry warned Mr. Shaw that the box had returned to your attention. Clara looked at Shaw. You told me it had been closed. It should have been. That came before he could stop it. Kramer's eyes sharpened. Wolfe's brows rose. Should have been. Shaw pressed his lips together. Wolfe continued. You entered box 218 3 weeks ago and found it empty. Eleanor Voss had removed the ledgers years earlier. After her death, they passed to an executor instructed to preserve them until the Hale family was safe. Clara said, Then how did they return to the box? Wolfe looked at Shaw. He obtained them. Shaw laughed, but there was no strength in it. From a dead woman? From her former attorney. You had been making partial repayments to the trusts for 12 years, because Miss Voss threatened to release copies. When Mrs. Hale asked about the box, you feared the attorney would act. You paid him for the originals. Kramer said, The attorney admits the transaction. Shaw's face hardened. He is lying to protect himself. He preserved your checks, Kramer replied. Wolfe went on. You now possessed the original records, Edward Hale's letter, and the unused deposit key. Destroying the documents was dangerous because copies still existed. Keeping them was dangerous because Mrs. Hale had revived the box. You therefore devised a controlled discovery. I placed evidence against myself? Shaw demanded. You placed evidence you believed you could explain. Wolfe tapped the ledgers. You expected to say Edward Hale had manufactured the books and hidden them before fleeing. The forged confession would support that claim. My public acceptance of the envelope would give the discovery respectability. The powder would prevent me from controlling the crucial minutes, he said. And the outer key. The key marked 42 led to planted documents that looked too convenient, Wolfe replied. They prepared us to distrust evidence against Mr. Shaw. After that false trail, the genuine deposit key would appear more persuasive because it emerged from the supposedly sealed confession. Shaw turned to Parker. You opened the envelope. You could have placed the key inside. Parker looked offended. I prefer compounds to slander. Wolfe said, the key carried microscopic traces of the same metal polish used in your private vault office. The blank paper in the inner compartment came from a stationery batch purchased by Shaw and Leland Bank 17 years ago and retained in its archive. Kramer added, We found the remaining sheets. Shaw stared at the envelope. It had failed him at every edge, Wolfe said. You selected my handwriting because I had once declared Edward Hale's note forged. You believed the imitation would compel me to reopen the old file. You were correct. Shaw looked at him. Then your own vanity helped me. No, my failure did. The words changed the room. Wolfe rarely admitted error. He did not avoid it through dishonesty. He avoided it through accuracy, he continued. 18 years ago, I recognized that Edward Hale's confession was false. I therefore believed I had rejected the lie. You had, I said. No, I rejected the document, but accepted its shape. I waited. Wolfe looked toward Clara. I continued to treat Edward Hale as a fugitive who might have stolen the money, though I knew the confession was forged. I allowed the existence of the note to control the questions I asked. I searched for its writer, instead of asking who benefited from making every survivor act according to it. Shaw said nothing. The case remained unfinished. Wolfe continued, because I trusted a false confession once. Not its words, but its importance. He pointed toward the empty envelope. This time the confession was again presented as the center of the matter. It was not. There was no confession inside. There was only a blank page, a key, and a mechanism intended to control the witnesses. Clara looked at the old letters in her hands. You solved it by refusing to read Edward's confession. I solved it by refusing to believe that a confession must be read merely because someone calls it final. Kramer stepped toward Shaw. You heard him. Shaw stood. So this is the verdict? A messenger, a chemist, an old widow's letters and documents that passed through unknown hands. No, Wolfe said. The verdict is one fact interpreted by another. He counted them calmly. You knew the key number before it was visible. You knew the address imitated my handwriting, though your message did not mention it. You repeatedly demanded physical contact with the envelope. You purchased the chemical. You entered Hale's deposit box after telling Mrs. Hale it was closed. You recovered the ledgers from Eleanor Voss's attorney. You placed them in the box. You hired Mr. Lang. Your employee removed the mixing case from the warehouse. Each fact alone permits an excuse. Together they permit none. The commissioner nodded to Kramer. Kramer took Shaw by the arm. You are under arrest for theft, fraud, blackmail, attempted poisoning, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The district attorney can complete the list. Shaw looked at Clara. Your husband ran. To keep us alive, she said. He abandoned you. No. You made him disappear. That struck harder than anger. Stebbins handcuffed Shaw. Before they took him out, Shaw faced Wolfe. You still failed him 18 years ago. Yes, Wolfe said. Shaw waited for a defense. None came. Wolfe added, that is why you believed I could be used again. Shaw was taken from the office. The commissioner followed after promising Clara that the trust records and Dean's conviction would receive immediate review. Parker collected his report and glass tubes. Peter Lang left with win $10 from me in the story of his life, though Kramer warned him not to sell it before the trial. Dean remained near the bookshelves. So the ledgers clear me? They prove Mr. Shaw controlled the transfers, Wolfe said. Your confession and conviction will be examined. I cannot restore 6 years. No one can. Dean stood with difficulty. But you can put the right name on them. Wolfe inclined his head. Yes. Dean left. Clara approached Wolfe's desk, carrying Edward's letters. I blamed you. You had cause. You never told me you still doubted Edward's guilt. I had doubt, not proof. Sometimes doubt is all a family has. Wolfe looked at her. Yes, she placed one letter beside the glass cover. For your file, no, she stared. Wolfe said, the case is finished, keep it. Clara took the letter and held it against the others. Edward said you would reopen it. He overestimated my speed. For the first time she smiled. Then she left. Fritz entered soon afterward to announce that dinner had been kept warm, but could not be kept respectable indefinitely. Wolfe rose with proper urgency. I lifted the glass cover. The envelope beneath it was harmless now. Its handwriting was false, its confession imaginary, and its poison removed. You really thought about that case for 18 years, I asked. Occasionally. Meaning often. Meaning when necessary. And you remembered it wrong. I assigned importance incorrectly. That is a long phrase for wrong. Wolfe scowled and headed toward the dining room. I followed. At the door he stopped. Archie. Yes, destroy the blank page after the trial. Why? It has received more attention than it deserves. I looked back at the envelope. 18 years earlier, a forged confession had ended an investigation without solving it. This time another confession had been promised, sealed, poisoned, and placed directly in Nero Wolfe's path. He defeated it by doing the one thing its creator had never considered possible. He refused to open it.